Chapter 1127. The second day after his birthday, Poplar Fruit received a call from Mr. He. They had been in contact for a long time, but Poplar Fruit still felt guilty towards Mr. He. This was because Poplar Fruit had always rejected Mr. He's invitations to appear on shows. There were Fast Forward and other shows. This summer, Mr. He wanted Poplar Fruit to appear on Central TV's summer vacation show, Young China Strong. Of course, he would be a guest on the show. Poplar Fruit was very interested in this show, but he was too busy, so he had to decline again. But their friendship was still there. Mr. He would visit Poplar Fruit's house every now and then. Mr. He also asked Poplar Fruit for help a while ago. His first movie, Jasmine Blossoms, would be filmed at Guangdong Agricultural University. He asked Poplar Fruit for help with the application and coordination. This was not difficult. Although Poplar Fruit was not from the Agricultural University, he had interacted with the leaders there. Most importantly, Poplar Fruit had connections in both the Education Department and the Education Department. All he had to do was mention it and the Agricultural University happily agreed. But Mr. He did not seem to want to tell Poplar Fruit about his movie. Instead, he asked, "Poplar Fruit, are you going to participate in Where's Dad Go?" Young Guo stared blankly and asked doubtfully, "No? I didn't even receive any notice. Why do you ask?" He still did not realize what kind of discussion his video had caused yesterday. Mr. He asked, "No, I'm asking if you are interested in participating. Everyone is talking about it online." Mr. He explained a little and Poplar Fruit realized that the video he posted yesterday had been forwarded and commented on by too many people. Other than Poplar Fruit's fan gift show, Poplar Fruit's last comment attracted a lot of attention. Coincidentally, the second season of Where Are We Going, Dad, had just finished airing. The popularity of Where Are We Going, Dad, had not cooled down yet. People were already thinking and guessing the guest list for the next season. As for Poplar Fruit, he didn't think much of it. Even when he was explaining to Teacher He thought, "I didn't say that I had to go, Daddy. I'm just being generous because I can't fulfill my daughter's wish, so I'm looking forward to the future." Poplar Fruit laughed. "What's wrong with that? I didn't complain that Mango Terrace didn't give us a chance. That's obviously impossible, isn't it?" Poplar Fruit, "You underestimate your own influence." Teacher He said. Mr. He had more than 60 million fans. Of course, Poplar Fruit couldn't compare to him, but they weren't that far behind. Poplar Fruit's Weibo was also a verified account with tens of millions of fans. Although there would definitely be a lot of fake fans, if there were a few diehard fans, it would still be very impressive. Just like that, the fans kept urging Mango Terrace to invite Poplar Fruit to be a guest for the next season. This topic instantly became a hot topic. I've caused you so much trouble." Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said embarrassedly, "How about this? I'll post on Weibo to appease the fans. There's no need. Do you think I'm calling to criticize you?" Teacher He said with a smile. In reality, Teacher He and Poplar Fruit had nothing to do with each other, even though they were colleagues. With Teacher His relationship with Poplar Fruit, he definitely wouldn't criticize Poplar Fruit over such a small matter. Also, this isn't a bad thing. Teacher He laughed. After he explained a little, Yang Guo finally understood. It turned out that Daddy Go Nowhere wished that there would still be people discussing the show even before it was aired. It was just an appeal now. Would the production team listen to the audience's cries? That's impossible. The guest list for every episode of Daddy Go was not only based on the show's own requirements, but there were also major conflicts of interest regarding who was chosen. Poplar Fruit, do you really want to bring Kiki on the show? Teacher He asked. To be exact, it's not me who wants it, but Kiki wants it. She really likes this show, and Kiki made a wish. I want to help her fulfill it. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Actually, I recommended you in the first season of Daddy Go." Teacher He suddenly revealed a secret. But unfortunately, Director Xie said that Kiki was too young and didn't agree. Hearing that, Poplar Fruit was surprised. He didn't know that he had a brush with Daddy Go in the first season, but thinking about it, it was true that Kiki was only a little over a year old at that time. Although she was more mature compared to other children her age, she was still young. Director Xie didn't allow it. Poplar Fruit himself would have rejected the invitation if he had received it. There was no need to mention the past. Teacher He asked Poplar Fruit about his thoughts and then recommended him again. Don't get your hopes up. Teacher He said to Poplar Fruit, I can only say that I'll try. It's okay. It doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. Poplar Fruit laughed. If it's not convenient for you, there's no need to recommend me. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to trouble others, including Teacher He and his fans. This time, the matter was so big that even Teacher He was alarmed. This was something that Poplar Fruit didn't expect. All along, Poplar Fruit wanted to rely on his own ability to fight for everything he wanted, not rely on nepotism. Including the previous Top 10 award, Poplar Fruit mainly relied on his own reputation and achievement. Today, Poplar Fruit was about to reject Teacher His kindness, but he swallowed it back down because he suddenly remembered Kiki's wish. For the first time, Poplar Fruit changed his insistence. It's good to have a little hope. After the phone call with Teacher He, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment, but still went online to check the situation. In fact, at first, it was Poplar Fruit's fans who were discussing it. They even dug up a fan's suggestion from a year ago. Where are we going, Daddy? We should invite Poplar Fruit and Kiki for the second season. At that time, the fans' reason was that since Zhongliang could be on Where Are We Going, Daddy, why not invite Poplar Fruit, who had better modeling achievements and looks than Zhongliang, as a guest? At that time, everyone only discussed it a little and didn't pay much attention to it. However, now that it was dug up, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's fans regretted it. If they had worked harder back then, they would have been able to fulfill Kiki's wish, right? It was because of this guilt that they started to call for Poplar Fruit to be on the show. Poplar Fruit realized that it wasn't just the netizens who were making a fuss. Some media outlets also began to report on this hot topic. In particular, his old flame, Tengzun News, also liked to push this matter to the headlines. Tengzun News also listed the top 10 reasons why Poplar Fruit was qualified to be on the show. The entertainment reporters even said jokingly, Poplar Fruit, don't belittle yourself. Although you rarely walk around in the entertainment industry, we have never pushed you out of this circle. The voices came one after another, but it was far from the point of forcing him to abdicate. This was because another thing attracted people's attention. Chapter 1128. Sichuan province was already scarred and had yet to fully recover from the Wenchuan earthquake 6 years ago and the Yan earthquake last year. This time, it happened in Kangding, which was even more remote. Fortunately, the magnitude of the earthquake this time was relatively low, and the epicenter was located in a high mountain area where there were few people. There had been many earthquakes in history, so most of the buildings had good earthquake resistance, so there were not many casualties. However, the remoteness of the area and the destruction of the mountain roads added a certain degree of difficulty to the rescue. In addition, winter was coming, and the temperature in the mountain city fluctuated greatly. The rescue and resettlement of the disaster victims was imminent. Because the earthquake attracted the attention of netizens, the clamor about Poplar Fruit bringing Kiki on Where Are We Going, Dad, also subsided a lot. After all, Poplar Fruit was not a public figure. He was not good at managing his own fanbase, so the unity of his fans was still lacking. What's more, Yang urged the fans to be calm and not use their power to threaten others. Thus, this small storm was finally settled. Regarding the earthquake, Poplar Fruit was not idle. Not only did he donate his own money, but he also asked Fat Dragon to help buy some disaster relief items and send them to the disaster areas in Sichuan province. He was indeed not free because it was only 2 days after his birthday and he had to go around the country to give lectures. Also, there was one thing that had to be mentioned. The black guy, Mukaru, was happy to see the Chinese government officially communicate with him to discuss the best way to help him with online education. Mukaru talked to Poplar Fruit and the country had already communicated with Poplar Fruit. They also asked Poplar Fruit to send a technical team to Beijing to help with the research and development of the online platform and equipment. Yang Guo didn't want to pass on this responsibility to others. After all, he was the most knowledgeable about online education, as well as the language and cultural education of African countries. He had self-studied for more than a month. However, the leader was still Mukaru. Why did Mukaru have to take the lead? Because he was an African. With Mukaru taking the lead, a hot-blooded young man with both Tanzanian and Congolese backgrounds, there was a reason for China's assistance. Of course, this was a piece of cake for Poplar Fruit. To be able to help people in a poorer and more backward world was also a good deed. Although Poplar Fruit did not believe in Buddhism, he believed that everything in the world was related to cause and effect. If he did a good deed today, perhaps there would be a big reward tomorrow. Even if there was no reward, his heart and conscience would be comforted. Indeed, he didn't put in a lot of effort, because the country took over Dialiang, leaving Yang Guo with very simple work. Therefore, Yang Guo had time to express her opinion on her good friend's marriage. Fuck me. Are you fucking getting married? Did I hear wrongly? Poplar Fruit, who had not cursed in front of others for a long time, cursed in front of Song Jiwen. Not only that, he also grabbed Song Jiwen's head and touched his forehead to see if he had a fever. Today, Poplar Fruit was in school, then Song Jiwen came over to talk to Poplar Fruit about something. Then, the explosive news of his marriage came out. Heh, you didn't hear wrong. Song Jiwen let Yang Guo twist and turn, but he still had a sly smile on his face. Okay, when was it decided? How come I didn't know? Poplar Fruit also calmed down. He sat down and put his arm on the plastic table of the beverage shop. He stretched out his hand and said, "Give me the invitation, I'll see when. If there's a conflict, I'll have to ask for a change of time." No matter what, this was his best friend's wedding. No matter how busy Poplar Fruit was, he had to make time to attend the wedding. It hasn't been decided yet. Song Jiwen laughed and scratched his head. He said, "It was decided yesterday. My parents haven't told me yet, so I'm here to discuss it with you." That's not right. You're getting married in such a hurry? Poplar Fruit looked at Song Jiwen in confusion. Although Poplar Fruit was touched that he told him immediately, Poplar Fruit still felt that something was wrong. 2 weeks ago, when Song Jiwen came to Poplar Fruit's birthday, they were still a couple. They were still far away from their goal of getting married. What made them suddenly decide to get married? Song Jiwen scratched his head and pretended to be simple and honest. He said, "Hehe, when the conditions are right, success comes naturally." What do you mean? Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of something. His eyes suddenly widened as he looked at Song Jiwen. He didn't say anything. But Song Jiwen scratched his head, smiled embarrassedly, and finally nodded. Poplar Fruit's heart was suddenly filled with thousands of horses galloping, covering the sky with flying grass, mud, and horses. Damn, you're so capable. Poplar Fruit pointed at Song Jiwen weakly. He didn't want to complain anymore. Hehe, aren't you the pot calling the kettle black? Song Jiwen laughed shamelessly. Although what he said was right, Poplar Fruit still rolled his eyes and said, "We're far from it. At least, I didn't mean it. Also, I pay attention to safety measures, okay? How many months has it been broken?" Poplar Fruit looked at Song Jiwen and asked. 2 months. Song Jiwen scratched his head and said, "We haven't seen the scale yet, but we have to get married soon." Little Chili said she doesn't want to be a joke when she's pregnant. What do you think? Poplar Fruit glanced at him. What do I think? I don't have any opinions. You're 27, I'm 27 too. It's time to get married. Song Jiwen said with a smile. You still have a conscience. Poplar Fruit rubbed his eyebrows and began to help Song Jiwen think about this problem. When they had just graduated, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen talked about their dreams. He said that he would never get married before the age of 30 because he hadn't enjoyed enough of the colorful world. Forget it, I'll help you tell godparents. Poplar Fruit sighed and said, "What about the time? Do you have a time?" Song Jiwen stood up and said with a smile, "The time is easy, it's best to do it within this year. It's okay to cover it with the wedding dress this year, but everything will be exposed next year." Easy your sister. So hasty. Poplar Fruit was speechless, but he still nodded. "I know you're a good brother." Song Jiwen chuckled. He relaxed, drank a mouthful of water, and then said, "Laro Guo, don't you think it's quite emotional?" Song Jiwen made a sad expression. Emotional about what? The impermanence of life. Surprises always pop out when you don't expect them. The preciousness of family. Or the rush of time. Poplar Fruit raised his eyelids and asked lazily. What he said, he himself also felt emotional. No. Song Jiwen smiled and said, when we were in school, our dormitory was discussing who would get married first and who would get married last. You were recognized as the first, and I was recognized as the last. In the end, I got married earlier than you, haha. That's right. Why didn't Poplar Fruit think of this? However, when he saw Song Jiwen's smug expression, Poplar Fruit's emotions disappeared, leaving only the desire to beat him up. Chapter 1129. Song Jiwen was about to get married. This man, who had been unrestrained all his life, had not had time to fulfill his unrestrained wish. He was tied to the harbor of marriage by a woman who was pregnant with a child. Communication with the Song family was surprisingly smooth. Liu Suqin originally had some complaints about Song Jiwen dating a girl from another province, but now that she was pregnant, she could only sigh and accept it. Chen Anlan wasn't a bad person either. After leaving Yang Cheng for half a year, she continued to open a martial arts dojo. However, this time, she could hang up her family's name and call a few martial arts masters from her family to act as instructors. She could retreat behind the scenes and be a boss who didn't have to work so hard. And to be honest, Chen Anlan's personality was very much liked by Liu Suqin. Although Chen Anlan often punched and kicked Song Jiwen, she was very respectful to her elders. This was also a good tradition cultivated by martial artists from a young age. It was also this kind of respect that made Liu Suqin unable to put on the airs of a strict mother-in-law. Chen Anlan's family members also came over. There were several valiant and strong men, and they almost scared the Song family. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit was there. His gentle aura blocked the other party's imposing manner, and it also changed the Chen family's opinion of the Song family. After 2 days of discussion, Poplar Fruit didn't know how the discussion ended, but both parties finally came to an agreement. They even confirmed the wedding date. Therefore, Song Jiwen and Chen Anlan's wedding was only left with the final preparations. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to participate. Song Jiwen and his family were busy booking hotels and sending out wedding invitations. Fong Beibei accompanied Chen Anlan to pick out the wedding dress and design the wedding decorations. Everything was progressing steadily. However, in mid-December, Poplar Fruit became the hottest news figure in the country again. It wasn't that Poplar Fruit had done something amazing again, but that Poplar Fruit's name had actually appeared on Central TV's list of the top 10 people who touched China in 2014. Although he hadn't really been evaluated as one of the top 10 figures, being on the list of candidates was already a very great thing. Usually, when this candidate list was announced every year, it didn't receive much attention from the people. But this year, the sharp-eyed reporters discovered the existence of Poplar Fruit. In the past, it was always some good people who contributed silently, but Poplar Fruit wasn't some unknown person. Moreover, Poplar Fruit was so young that even the reporters were surprised by the name list. Of course, being surprised was one thing. He was keenly aware of the news value of this controversy. It would definitely cause a huge controversy. Thus, this matter was exposed. It wasn't appropriate to say that it was exposed because Central TV had publicized the name list, but very few people would go to the official website to look at it. Moreover, it wasn't the voting period yet, so the reporters were at most hyping up the news of Poplar Fruit being on the list. But Poplar Fruit was really too young. He was only officially approaching the age of 27 this year. He wasn't even close to the slightly mature age of 30. It was really hard to convince people. Therefore, there were two opposing forces on the internet. One side was Poplar Fruit's fans, and the other side was other people. Poplar Fruit's fans naturally supported Poplar Fruit unconditionally, even though they themselves felt a little guilty. Other people's reactions were a little different. Some netizens who understood Poplar Fruit were a little more rational. They only felt that Poplar Fruit was too young and couldn't touch China. On the other hand, more extreme netizens angrily attacked Poplar Fruit and Central TV on the internet, saying that there must be something shady going on behind the scenes and that Poplar Fruit was some kind of second-generation heir. Poplar Fruit really didn't know about this matter. Moreover, he was so busy flying back and forth in the country. When he came back, he still had to worry about his brother's wedding. He didn't have time to pay attention to the current news. By the time he found out about it, the internet was already in an uproar. I was selected. Why didn't I know about it? Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei in confusion. Fong Beibei showed him some reports. After Poplar Fruit asked a few people, he found out that the province had directly reported to Poplar Fruit. The higher-ups also felt that Poplar Fruit wasn't bad, so they specially approved Poplar Fruit's name on the list. For this matter, Poplar Fruit really couldn't come forward. He couldn't provoke his fans to fight with others. Regardless of whether it was right to do so, this behavior was not in line with Poplar Fruit's character at all. However, Poplar Fruit also couldn't ask his fans to not quarrel with the other party because his fans didn't do anything wrong. He couldn't possibly stop others from voting for him, right? Poplar Fruit could only privately ask the initiators of a few fan organizations who were in close contact with him to calm everyone's emotions. However, the one who started the trouble should end it. The organizers of Central TV's Touching China program should also stand up and give an explanation in the face of public criticism. However, they did not directly respond. Instead, they played the recorded promotional VCR about Poplar Fruit's selection in advance. Moreover, they promoted it on Weibo with videos and multiple pictures. Many people watched the VCR through online channels. Only from the video did they understand that this seemingly low-key young man, who often received attention, had made a lot of contributions that they did not know about in addition to his brave heroic act of taking on 8 people by himself in March. Remote volunteer teaching was a new type of public service that many people had only heard of but did not have a deep understanding of. It was founded by Poplar Fruit and gradually became a public service enterprise under continuous investment and appeal. It was epoch-making and there was no other similar model in the world. It allowed China to be one step ahead of the rest of the world and take the lead in reforming education in remote mountainous areas. At present, this education model not only shortened the distance between time and space, but also mobilized a large number of outstanding students to dedicate themselves and care for children in the mountainous areas. It allowed the light of education to benefit tens of millions of poor children. It also broke through and improved the quality of education, truly shortening the gap between urban and rural, eastern and western areas in terms of teaching standards and resources. Leader number 1 had praised remote volunteer teaching at the conference. Poverty alleviation must be supported by the intellect. Letting children in poor areas receive a good education is an important task for poverty alleviation and development. It is also an important way to stop the transmission of poverty between generations. It was also under his guidance that remote volunteer teaching had developed rapidly. The country was going to adopt the model of cooperation between the country and university student voluntary organizations to further improve the level and popularization of education in the mountainous areas. And all of this was closely related to Poplar Fruit. Now, Poplar Fruit was still working tirelessly to carry out speech activities all over the country, appealing for more university students to join this public service enterprise. The VCR also mentioned a statistic that no one had calculated. In the past 2 years, Poplar Fruit's personal donations to the Remote Volunteer Teaching Charity Fund exceeded 200 million yuan. Seeing this statistic, many dissatisfied netizens fell silent. Chapter 1130. In this world, Yang Guo wasn't the only one who donated a large sum of money. For example, Wang Shitsong had asked him to donate 100 million renminbi to buy Poplar Fruit's Ledong Zhuiyue shares. There were countless people who donated more than Yang Guo. Not to mention Bill Gates, who donated tens of billions. Xiao Yifu, who had passed away in Hong Kong, donated nearly 5 billion Hong Kong dollars in China. But this was different. Whether it was Wang Shitsong or Old Master Xiao Yifu, the money they donated was just a drop in the ocean compared to what they earned. Poplar Fruit had donated 200 million renminbi, which was more than 80% of his earning. Poplar Fruit was already very good at making money. Many professors and scholars like him were poor all their lives. But his generosity did not allow him to keep much money. According to some netizens, Poplar Fruit's biggest expense was his duplex apartment. Even though he had made so much money, he had never spent so much money. He didn't have any valuable jewelry on him. Other than the clothes given to him by Givenchy, the rest of his clothes were all street goods that didn't cost more than $1,000, compared to the clothes of the rich. As for his car, Poplar Fruit had not changed his Land Rover for 3 years. Until now, he had only bought a Beetle for Fong Beibei. That's right. Fong Beibei did not mention this. Both of them were charity fanatics. One of them had made epoch-making contributions to education in the mountainous areas, and the other was famous in the pet industry in Guangzhou. The whole family shared their time and money for charity. Of course, this analysis was made by Poplar Fruit's fans and spread on Weibo. CCTV's VCR also mentioned other Poplar Fruit's contributions. Let's talk about the small ones first. Under Poplar Fruit's suggestion, New Translation Road Publishing House had adjusted the translator's remuneration system. This was the first time the publishing house had changed the translator's remuneration system. Although this reform was not widespread in the entire industry, at the very least, the new translation path had given all translators and translation enthusiasts a ray of hope. Not only that, but the books translated by Poplar Fruit, in addition to the works of the 2 Nobel Prize winners, also launched several global bestsellers and made Chinese online novels popular all over the world. This was especially true for Chinese fantasy novels. Not only did they break the seal of Western fantasy, but they also occupied a place in the world of literature. The success of these online novels could not be attributed to Poplar Fruit, but for the world to see and acknowledge them, it was definitely inseparable from Poplar Fruit's hard work. Nowadays, the export of online literature had gradually become a small industry. It was no longer difficult for Poplar Fruit to support it alone. But now, Poplar Fruit's translations were still the most recognized flag in the hearts of foreign readers. If it was just remote teaching, if it was only translating and promoting online literature, Poplar Fruit was far from reaching the level of touching China. This was because there were many people who had done more than Poplar Fruit, for example, Teacher Meng, who had shared his life in the mountains. In the VCR recorded by CCTV, they also introduced Poplar Fruit's greatest achievement this year, the Chinese word disassembly theory of Chinese education. This theory was born last year. Some news media reported it, but because the academic theory itself did not receive much attention, not many people knew about it even though it was broadcast on news simulcast in September this year. But now, through the VCR, people finally knew about it and finally understood the impact of the theory developed by Poplar Fruit. We have said it many times before, but this word is still not enough to describe the word disassembly theory. Or rather, it is more appropriate to say that it is a theory that promotes the development of an era. The emergence of the word disassembly method was no less significant than the invention of pinyin and the use of punctuation to the Chinese language. It made Chinese easier to learn. Although the word disassembly method had not yet been popularized in China because the Chinese education model in China was deeply rooted, the acceptance was too broad, and the reform was difficult. It needed to be done slowly, but overseas, the theory had been fully applied. The voice host in the VCR said with excitement, "In the future, we will see more and more foreigners speaking fluent Mandarin." The reason why English could be used all over the world was mainly because of the strength of the United States in the 20th century, but it was also because English was easier to learn. The number of Chinese speakers in the world accounted for about 1/5 of the world's total population, and the use of Chinese was also ranked third in the world. In addition, Chinese culture had a rich heritage of more than 5,000 years. In terms of attractiveness to foreigners, it was not much worse than English. However, the popularity of Chinese teaching abroad was not high. The main reason was that Chinese was too difficult to learn. Many people used to think that it was one of the most difficult languages in the world to learn. Now that the difficulty of learning Chinese had decreased, Chinese books and culture were gradually warming up all over the world. In addition to the increasingly open and developed China, it was foreseeable that Chinese learning would become more and more popular with people all over the world. The host's excitement was not because of his own imagination, but because there was evidence. Data showed that after the Confucius Institutes around the world promoted the new teaching model under the new education theory in the middle of this year, Not only did the passing rate and passing speed of the Chinese exam greatly increase, but the number of people who signed up had also surprisingly reached a record high, 4 million. The previous highest number was 1.5 million. The VCR commentator was excited by himself, and the audience was also excited. Although it was just a vision, who would not want to see a prosperous dynasty that belonged to the Chinese language? Of course, this still needed people from all walks of life and the country's strong promotion. Whether this vision could really be realized in the future was another matter. However, Poplar Fruit's contribution was unquestionable. He opened up a new path for the country, for the Chinese language, and for the rise of national culture, a bridge that could cross the ocean and reach the other side. There was no need for time to give affirmation. Poplar Fruit's greatness was enough to make people all over the country respect him. Yes, Poplar Fruit was still young, so it was difficult for some older people to put aside their prejudices and feel moved by him. But Poplar Fruit was really young. He had already achieved such great achievements now, so what heights could he reach in the future? After Old G's death, there would be no more masters in China. This comment could probably be kicked away, right? Even if Poplar Fruit could not be recognized as a master, with his unlimited potential, his strength that was infinitely close to that of a master, and his contributions that were already at the level of a master, it was only a matter of time before Poplar Fruit became a master. After this video was released, Poplar Fruit's fans cheered and began to hold their heads high to announce to the world. Many of those who had previously opposed him changed sides and used reposts to express their approval. Those who did not change sides also fell silent. Only a few extreme netizens who would shout no matter what others said were left, but they were no longer in the mood. Their clamor could not gain support. Perhaps Poplar Fruit had really touched China. Chapter 1131. Song Jiwen's wedding was in the last week of December. The whole wedding was very lively. Poplar Fruit also met many of his old classmates who were already working all over the country. The wedding was quite interesting. Song Jiwen and Chen Anlan got married. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were the best man and bridesmaid respectively. Kiki and a little boy from the Song family were the flower girls. Liu Suqin was so happy that she pulled Poplar Fruit and said, "I thought you two and Jiwen were getting married together." In fact, Fong Beibei, who had participated in many processes, was also moved. She later whispered to Poplar Fruit that she cried during the wedding ceremony. Poplar Fruit held Fong Beibei's hand and said in her ear with a smile, "Then I'll buy a ring tomorrow and propose to you." Of course, it was just a joke. However, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei had already been engaged during the discussion between the two families. The wedding date was set for the second half of 2015. This was because it was now the last year of Fong Beibei's undergraduate studies. Although she would continue to study for her PhD, Fong Beibei had already decided to marry Poplar Fruit after graduation. Although in private, Fong Beibei would also refer to herself as Mrs. Yang in front of Poplar Fruit. This was also a little fun between the two of them. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's marriage was still one step away. However, if nothing unexpected happened, this wedding was not far away, was it not? The last month of 2014 passed quickly. Although there was a dispute about the list of the top 10 people who touched China and Song Jiwen's lively wedding, it passed quickly in the end. Of course, there was still an accident on the last day. There was a stampede on the Bund of Shanghai that shocked the whole country. It was as if the chaos and accidents of the past year had not been resolved. However, people were more willing to believe that this was the end of 2014 and that 2015 would be a new beginning, a beautiful beginning. For example, its stock market. However, the stock market had nothing to do with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit was still busy with his speech post, traveling all over the country. But looking back, his half a year of hard work was actually quite worth it. Needless to say, at present, although remote teaching had been freed from Poplar Fruit's control, which was also what he was looking forward to, it had been able to show a trend of positive development all over the country. Now, the only thing that Poplar Fruit could talk about was the remote teaching charity fund that he had founded. After the fund received widespread attention in December, it received a lot of donations. Some rich people even donated generously. At present, It had nearly 500 million in charity donations. Poplar Fruit did not intend to hide it from himself or the universities in Guangdong province. Instead, he expanded the scope of the fund's benefits to all parts of the country. The purpose of the fund was to fund remote teaching clubs all over the country and close communication with mountain village children, like the exchange of visits between the two sides during the holidays. Poplar Fruit also intended to leave the management of the charity fund to the professionals. Many people might have forgotten about Guan Yandian's existence, but he was a good friend who translated the biography of Steve Jobs with Poplar Fruit. After he graduated with a master's degree in management from Australia, he returned to China. Because they had been in contact before, and this guy still maintained a good interest in translation, Poplar Fruit let him work in the translation management department of the new translation company. At the same time, he also wanted to see if he could pick up the job of translating. In the end, Guan Yandian still could not become a good professional translator. His talent was a little lacking. However, his management skills were still good. After all, he had studied a master's degree in management for a few years. Later, in the early summer of 2014, Poplar Fruit gradually did not have the energy to do the charity fund himself. Poplar Fruit decided to give this important task to Guan Yandian. In other words, he took Guan Yandian back from the new translation company. As it turned out, Guan Yandian managed the charity fund very well. Of course, Guan Yandian was not alone. Wang Yubo had made a great contribution to remote teaching. Originally, he had a quota for postgraduate studies. However, this guy was really not interested in language subjects. Therefore, after graduating from university last year, he also joined the remote teaching charity fund. At first, he was an assistant to Guan Yandian. Later, he was mainly responsible for the cooperation with the remote teaching charity organizations of the major universities in the country. This was also his strength. Therefore, under the management of Guan Yandian and Wang Yubo, the remote teaching charity fund was far better than under the management of Poplar Fruit alone. They were going to start recruiting people this year. Since Yang Guo had the two generals, Heng and Ha, he simply delegated all the power to Guan Yandian and Wang Yubo. Without changing his original intention and the principle of fairness, justice, and openness, he let Guan Yandian and Wang Yubo take charge until the end. After the start of 2015, before Poplar Fruit's speech schedule ended, the online voting for the top 10 people who touched China began. Poplar Fruit's fans immediately took action. They spread the news and called for more people to vote for Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit did not solicit votes. This was all a publicity campaign launched by the fans. Poplar Fruit did not even pay attention to the voting process and results. The newly appointed mayor of his hometown called Poplar Fruit to ask about him. He even wanted to help him solicit votes across the county. However, Poplar Fruit still smiled bitterly and declined. To be honest, Poplar Fruit did not want to win this award. He felt that he did not do more than the other candidates. For example, Mulati, a police officer in Xinjiang, went undercover to catch drug dealers and bravely fought terrorists in a bomb pile. He did not have Poplar Fruit's agile skills, but he had an incomparably firm will and a fighting spirit that did not care about personal safety. For 14 years, it was because of Xinjiang police officers like him who fought on the front lines to protect this land that Xinjiang was able to win peace and tranquility in the midst of foreign terrorist forces. Really, if Poplar Fruit were to win this award, Poplar Fruit would not deserve it. Poplar Fruit did not think too much and did not pursue too much. He quietly lived his life. However, he did not know that because of the cheers of millions of fans and teacher his recommendation, he had already entered the sights of the program Where Do You Go, Daddy? However, it was not yet time to finalize the guest list for this year's program. Director Xie, no, it should be producer Xie, wanted to wait a little longer, just a little longer. One had to know that the second season of Where Do You Go, Daddy, did not receive as much praise as expected. Although there were still many voices of support, it still paled in comparison to the first season, especially the last few episodes. Therefore, producer Xie decided to make some improvements to the third season of Where Do You Go, Daddy. In addition to the setting of the content, there was also the selection of guests. It needed to be considered again and again before a decision could be made. Chapter 1132. This year's spring festival came a little late, so Poplar Fruit didn't go home so early. Taking advantage of the summer vacation, Poplar Fruit, who was already on vacation, took Kiki, who was also on vacation, to watch a movie. Pleasant Goat and Grey Wolf in the Year of Pleasant Goat. This was the 7th movie version of Pleasant Goat. Previously, Kiki had only seen it on the internet. Now that Kiki was old enough, Poplar Fruit took her to the cinema to watch the premiere. Fong Beibei went back to school early in the morning because the academician professor's project team suddenly lacked people. She didn't go back to school with Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't unhappy. Instead, he felt that Fong Beibei was too lucky. To be honest, Poplar Fruit had completely passed the age of watching children's cartoons. Looking at Pleasant Goat, Poplar Fruit always had a kind of tiredness that made him want to sleep. But in order to accompany his daughter, Poplar Fruit had to bite the bullet and watch the whole movie. Otherwise, when they came out of the cinema later, Kiki would pull him and say something, and he wouldn't understand at all. However, this movie was still a bit interesting. There was a breakthrough in the plot. Not only was there a time travel plot, but they were all sent to ancient times by the time camera. There was also a magical body swap plot in Kiki. This plot might not be new in the eyes of Poplar Fruit and other adults. As early as more than 10 years ago, Stephen Chow's Journey to the West had already played with this plot. But for children, this was a very, very magical and incredible thing. After coming out, Kiki, who finally recovered from the movie plot, couldn't help but hold her father's hand and ask, "Papa, why did Lazy Goat and Grey Wolf swap bodies?" This was a good question. Poplar Fruit didn't know how to answer it. He had to vaguely repeat the plot of the movie again. But Kiki was more interested in this magical body swap. Why didn't Pleasant Goat and Grey Wolf swap bodies? Then, can I swap bodies with other children? The little guy was outside the cinema, holding his father's hand as he skipped along. His imagination kept running wild as he thought about it. Then why didn't Kiki say that she wanted to swap bodies with Daddy? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Yeah. If I switch with Papa, can Papa do it? Kiki's eyes lit up. She happily held her father's hand and could not walk anymore. Sure. But if Kiki becomes a father, will she take care of me like how I take care of you? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. However, such an awkward sentence made Kiki a little dizzy. She muttered, if Kiki becomes a Papa's Papa, take care of Papa? Aya, I don't understand. The little guy was bashful for a while. He put down the question and pouted, asking his father to pick her up. He also muttered, it must be because Papa refused to swap with Kiki and made Kiki dizzy. Of course, he couldn't swap with Kiki. He didn't even have the mental preparation to take care of his father. Poplar Fruit happily played with the little guy for a while before he went to find his car parked in the hotel parking lot across the street. Driving home, when he went upstairs, Kiki sat on his father's neck and rode on the big horse. Now that Kiki was growing up, Fong Beibei had some difficulty holding her. Only Poplar Fruit could hold his daughter in various positions. Kiki sat very steadily. She held a Pleasant Goat doll that she bought in the cinema in one hand and gently touched Poplar Fruit's short hair with the other hand. She felt that it was very interesting. She suddenly came over and whispered in her father's ear, Papa, if you are taken away by Grey Wolf, Kiki will also save you. Ah, is that so? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile, then how will Kiki save Papa? Although it was a little naive for his daughter's filial piety, Poplar Fruit was still somewhat moved. I want to be like Pleasant Goat, bravely defeat Grey Wolf, and then save Papa. Kiki sat on her father's neck and said with a heroic spirit. Then, what if Grey Wolf is too powerful? Poplar Fruit chatted with Kiki like this. Unknowingly, they had already returned home. He took out the key to open the door. How powerful? Kiki asked doubtfully. Kiki is more powerful than Pleasant Goat. I can play Ben boxing. When he opened the door, Fong Beibei had already returned. She put down the iPad that she was playing with and asked with a smile, "You're back? Was the movie good?" Good. Ma, it's a pity that you didn't go to see the movie. Kiki immediately chirped in reply. She liked it very much. Poplar Fruit smiled and carried Kiki down, and said, on the way back, she was telling me the plot of the movie. She also said that if Grey Wolf took Papa away, she would also come to save Papa. Wow, Kiki is so brave, so powerful. Fong Beibei applauded Kiki. Kiki, however, hugged Fong Beibei's thigh, pouted her small mouth and said, but Papa said that I can't beat Grey Wolf. It doesn't matter, Kiki is still young. When she grows up, she can protect Papa and Papa. Fong Beibei smiled and comforted her. But Kiki is also very powerful now. Grey Wolf is actually not powerful at all, my Ben boxing can beat him. Kiki somewhat proudly puffed out her small chest. Poplar Fruit felt that this kind of conversation was a little interesting. He said with a smile, what if it's not just Grey Wolf? What if it's like in the movie, Grey Wolf and Papa swapped bodies and then became as powerful as Papa? Kiki began to be confused again. Yes, Papa was so powerful, he was the most powerful person in the world in Kiki's mind. If he became Grey Wolf, how could Kiki beat him? She didn't think too far. How would Kiki face a Grey Wolf who looked exactly like her Papa and her Papa who looked exactly like Grey Wolf? But the more she thought, the more confused she would be. Alas, Papa is going to be eaten by Grey Wolf, woo woo, woo woo. Poplar Fruit teased Kiki, he was somewhat tired of it. Fong Beibei unhappily smiled and glared at him. Papa, don't cry, Kiki will beat the bad Grey Wolf. Kiki hurried over and comforted her Papa. The little fellow really thought that her Papa was sad. She said, Papa, don't be afraid, as long as Kiki bravely fights with Grey Wolf, Papa will be safe. Because it's like this in the movies, a good child will definitely be able to defeat the bad guy. What she said was so good, Poplar Fruit wanted to give Kiki a thumbs up. However, this guy's playful nature surged up, he suddenly jumped back a step, bared his fangs and brandished his claws, and laughed, Young Luochi, you've been fooled. I'm the real Grey Wolf, your Papa has been replaced by me. Fong Beibei almost burst out laughing, she covered her mouth and looked at Poplar Fruit's clumsy performance. Kiki was stunned, she saw the little fellow put her hands on her waist, wrinkled her nose, snorted and said, Grey Wolf, I'm not afraid of you, I've learned the Ben fist that Papa taught me. I also know Ben fist. Poplar Fruit shouted, sat down, and made a Ben fist on the spot. You're not allowed to know Ben fist, it was Papa who taught Kiki. Kiki pouted her small mouth and greeted him. In fact, Kiki also knew that her father was playing with her, but it was also very fun. So, the father and daughter fought with each other with Ben fist. Of course, clumsy fist had nothing to do with fighting. At best, it allowed Chichi to learn some of the martial arts moves. The lethality wasn't strong, but Chichi was still full of vigor when she used it. It was a little interesting. Poplar Fruit just used the posture of Wing Chun to parry, and smiled brightly. From time to time, he would sneak attack his daughter's little fist, and then, in a flash, he leaned over and kissed Kiki's little face. Kiki couldn't stop giggling. Little did they know that this funny scene had been recorded by the family photographer Fong Beibei with her mobile phone. Chapter 1133. In the end, the video recorded by Fong Beibei was uploaded to Weibo by Poplar Fruit. He happily shared with his fans how Kiki wanted to save her father from Big Bad Wolf. In Fong Beibei's words, Poplar Fruit became complacent because of his daughter's selfless love for him. He restrained himself from posting on Weibo. He really should let his fans see Poplar Fruit's dancing and frivolous appearance. Of course, the fans didn't know that. They were already moved by the loving appearance of the father and daughter when they fought. In particular, Poplar Fruit relied on his good kung fu to constantly bully Kiki. He even secretly kissed Kiki's face. This scene made many of Kiki's fans cry out, "Hey man, why aren't you letting go of our Kiki? If you have the guts, let me do it." Of course, these bad brothers still didn't have as many female fans. They hadn't seen Poplar Fruit show his skills for a long time, never at all. They almost forgot that Poplar Fruit was still the handsome hero with unparalleled kung fu in the past. However, what they were most interested in talking about was still Chichi's skills. I feel that Kiki's genes are inherited very well, the fans praised. Not only is she beautiful, but she also practices good kung fu. Look at how her small arms are waving. It's definitely not the kind of fist that ordinary people use. Poplar Fruit has already started to teach Kiki kung fu. Will our world be saved by a beautiful kung fu girl in the future? Of course, there was a lot of exaggeration and overpraise. However, it was obvious that everyone liked Kiki more and more. I don't know if everyone has noticed one word. In the past, the words that fans used to describe Kiki were mostly words like cute, adorable, and so on. Now, there was a slightly adult beauty. It wasn't that anyone had said this on purpose, but Chichi's gradual growth had caused everyone's focus to gradually change. In the past, Kiki was chubby. Her small arms, legs, and face were all very cute, but she was still a few years away from being beautiful. However, after the age of 3, Kiki began to grow taller. Perhaps she had inherited Poplar Fruit's genes. At the age of 3, she was already as tall as a 6-year-old girl. Because she had grown taller, Kiki had also gradually lost weight. This was definitely not Poplar Fruit abusing Kiki by not letting her eat. On the contrary, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei not only made nutritious and delicious meals for Kiki every day, but they also never let the fridge run out of fruits and milk. However, adequate nutrition only made Kiki grow taller. The little girl didn't seem to grow any fatter. Of course, it wasn't that exaggerated. It was just that she was becoming more and more beautiful. Except for a little baby fat on her face, when she wore the princess dress or the beautiful clothes that Zheng Yujie picked for her, she looked more and more like a beautiful girl. Of course, in Poplar Fruit's view, Kiki was still the little girl from before. She would always be Daddy's darling. During the Spring Festival, Poplar Fruit took Kiki and Fong Beibei back to their hometown. That's right, Fong Beibei also went back on New Year's Eve this year. Although she was a little reluctant, this year meant a lot to Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. The Fang family also agreed to let Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit go back to worship their ancestors. They were going to be part of the Yang family soon, so they had to do something. In their hometown, the statue of Poplar Fruit had already been removed. This was a good thing. Poplar Fruit didn't want to attract so much attention and attract so much hatred. However, it had to be said that Yang Rong's actions made everyone know that this small town in Guangdong province was Poplar Fruit's hometown. Even people in his hometown who went out to work and do business would proudly introduce him to others. You know Poplar Fruit, right? He's from our hometown. He's amazing now. Although Poplar Fruit's fame wasn't obvious, the town was not big, and he was too obscure in the past. Therefore, it was not surprising that people were proud of Poplar Fruit. Of course, this was something that Poplar Fruit didn't know. When he returned to his hometown, many neighbors came to visit him, but it was only a little more than usual. In the past, because he made a lot of money, Poplar Fruit didn't feel any change. However, there was one change that made Poplar Fruit feel a little emotional. Yang Rong's attitude towards him was different from before. The new county party secretary didn't dare to casually order Poplar Fruit around. Instead, when he heard the news that Poplar Fruit had returned home, he rushed to the countryside to meet with Poplar Fruit. He wasn't humble, but when he faced Poplar Fruit, he showed a great degree of respect, as if Poplar Fruit was his superior. This wasn't an illusion of Poplar Fruit. Last time, when he called Poplar Fruit carefully and asked if he wanted to mobilize the people in the county to vote for Poplar Fruit felt it. Although he understood why Yang Rong's sudden downfall shocked him, Poplar Fruit was still a little uncomfortable. As the most senior official in his hometown, he was still afraid of him. There was no need at all. Poplar Fruit felt that unless someone touched his bottom line, Poplar Fruit always had the image of a good person. In any case, Poplar Fruit still accompanied him and talked a lot. During the conversation, Poplar Fruit felt that he wasn't like Yang Rong, and he wasn't like his predecessor Chen Longjiang, who was ambitious. Instead, he was more like a practical person. Later, when he chatted with his brother-in-law Yang Chongguan also confirmed Poplar Fruit's guess. He had been in office for more than half a year, but he didn't build roads or plazas as soon as he came. Instead, he visited each town and each street. He started from the people's livelihood and did some practical things. What interested Poplar Fruit more was the scholarship program proposed by the other party. In fact, it wasn't new, but their county had never had such a program before, so the secretary took the initiative to propose it. It was mainly for the high school students in the county who were admitted to famous universities to reward them with a symbolic and practical scholarship. Although the other party didn't mention it, Poplar Fruit took the initiative to say that he was willing to make some contributions to his hometown. He personally donated 5 million yuan, and then donated 3 million yuan on behalf of his family. In total, he donated 8 million yuan to the scholarship fund. After Poplar Fruit made this decision, the county party secretary was so moved that he almost knelt down in front of Poplar Fruit. It should be noted that when he first proposed this idea, there were very few entrepreneurs in the county. In addition, he had no prestige, and he could not coerce the entrepreneurs. Therefore, after much persuasion, it took him 3 months to raise a fund of less than 2 million yuan. This was also the result of the donations from the local businessmen's association. In the end, Poplar Fruit donated 4 times the hard-earned result. His idea was finally realized. After all, even if each person donated 10,000 yuan, 2 million yuan might be used up in 3 or 4 years. Now, there was a total of 10 million yuan, which was enough for the reward system to operate for nearly 10 years. Poplar Fruit was a good person, a very good person. This saying was not wrong at all. Chapter 1134. That Chinese New Year was not very peaceful because Poplar Fruit received a call from Beijing before the Chinese New Year. He won an award. That's right, it was the top 10 characters that touched China. Poplar Fruit was not mentally prepared for that award. After all, it was the top 10 characters that touched China. What did he do to deserve to stand on the podium of the top 10 characters of the year? Voting. Perhaps the public voting did have some effect. Poplar Fruit's fans also went crazy to vote for Poplar Fruit. However, everyone in China knew what the so-called voting was. Then, the only possibility was that the award was an honor given to Poplar Fruit by the country. However, objectively speaking, it was understandable that Poplar Fruit won the award. Because the selection of touching China, the focus can be big or small. Small, like some unknown people around us, they may be doing good deeds day after day for decades, or persevering for their families and loved ones. They are also worthy of our gratitude and respect. The big ones were like space heroes, like Liu Xiong, who won the world championship and changed the world's view of China and Asians. Although he didn't do much in the end, he deserved the word moved back then, and like Jin Jing, who used her own body to protect the Olympic flame. They deserved this honor. What about Poplar Fruit? It was the same. Take one aspect for example. Director Zhong and his Olympic team in the year 2008 won the top 10 characters of the year. The reason was that they showed Chinese culture to the world. In terms of showing Chinese culture, how was Poplar Fruit worse than Director Zhong? Whether it was the word-splitting technique or the contributions he made in the translation and literary world, Poplar Fruit really blew the Chinese style all over the world. Of course, there was bound to be controversy. After all, Poplar Fruit was too young and did not have enough experience. It was far from enough. However, it was undeniable that Poplar Fruit could have won the award if the issue of age was ignored. Or to put it this way, if Yang Guo was replaced by a white-haired old man who spent his entire life to make such great achievements and contributions, then there would definitely be no dispute about him receiving the award. In fact, it would be a one-sided cheering for him. At the end of the day, it was still prejudice. Poplar Fruit was young and had made such great achievements and contributions in only a few years. It was only natural that he should be questioned. That was the truth, but also the irony. Regardless, the country gave the award to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit had to go to Beijing to prepare for the award ceremony. That also disrupted his plans of reuniting with his family during the Chinese New Year. The Poplar Tree Year. After Chinese New Year's Eve and the first day of the Chinese New Year, Poplar Fruit drove Fong Beibei and Kiki drove through the night to Year Day. To return the favor, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei spent 3 days at the Fang's house. Of course, the happiest people were Father and Mother Fang. There was a sudden increase in visits from relatives. It was mainly because Poplar Fruit was becoming more and more famous. Moreover, their favorite child, Kiki, was also at home. For the past 3 days, Kiki was almost spoiled like a real princess. Whenever there was good food or drinks, Father and Mother Fang would serve her like servants. Even Poplar Fruit did not have the chance to get close to Kiki. Of course, Kiki was also very happy because she also received a super big red packet from Father and Mother Fang. In fact, this red packet was from Poplar Fruit. As Fang Beibei's son-in-law, Yang Guo naturally had to express his gratitude during the Spring Festival. He forcefully stuffed a card worth 100,000 renminbi into his parents-in-law's pocket money. The amount was the maximum amount that Fang Beibei could accept. However, Father Fang had the backbone of a scholar and was unwilling to accept such a big red packet from Poplar Fruit. Of course, Father Fang refused to take back the Poplar Fruit, so he gave it all back to Kiki. Mother Fang was a little reluctant, but she still listened to her father on important matters. Kiki was no longer the 1-year-old child that could be coaxed with a few yuan. She knew what this card represented and what a lot of money meant, so she was a little reluctant to give it to her father. Father Fang and Mother Fang both said that they were giving it to Kiki, so it was even harder for Kiki to return the card. In the end, it was Fang Beibei who stopped Poplar Fruit from throwing a tantrum at Kiki. She said, "All right, Poplar Fruit means well. I told him not to give it to you, but Grandpa and Grandma said that this is the proper etiquette." Etiquette was actually just a small gift. People in the countryside wouldn't be so extravagant as to give a 100,000 yuan card during the Chinese New Year. However, the Yang family felt that Poplar Fruit had earned a lot. If they didn't give him more, they would end up with a bad reputation for being stingy with their in-laws. Moreover, they were going to get married this year, so this card could be considered as a pre-betrothal gift. Poplar Fruit was always a little silly when it came to these things. He felt that his family was right, so he went back to discuss it with Fang Beibei, which led to this scene. "Then it's not wrong for us to give it to Kiki," Mother Fang retorted. She was the main force in the war of words. "It's natural for an old man to give a red packet to his granddaughter. Isn't that right, Kiki?" However, Kiki didn't dare to say anything at this time, because she felt that she didn't do the right thing. She might have made her father angry. "Then you shouldn't give the child so much money," Fang Beibei said with a smile to ease the atmosphere. "Come, Kiki, give me the card. Mom will keep it for you. When you grow up, I'll definitely return it to you." Kiki let go of her hand obediently, but she couldn't help but look at the card in Fang Beibei's hand. That card was equivalent to a lot of Kiki's Barbie dolls and cakes. "Little moneygrubber, what will you do in the future?" Fang Beibei couldn't help but laugh. This made Kiki a little embarrassed. However, there was still a problem that hadn't been solved yet. She stood up from her parents' side and threw herself into Poplar Fruit's arms. As she wriggled and acted coquettishly, she used her finger to press the corner of Poplar Fruit's mouth, trying to make him smile. Poplar Fruit, who had a straight face just now, smiled helplessly. He gently pinched the little girl's nose and said gently, "Don't do this in the future. If you need money in the future, you can ask Dad for it. It's not like Dad won't give it to you, right? How can you ask Grandpa and Grandma for so much money? Stop scolding Kiki." Fang Beibei also scolded him and said, "I told you not to give Dad and Mom so much money, but you didn't listen. Can money buy health?" Fang Beibei actually meant to beat around the bush and tell Poplar Fruit that in the future, it would be better to buy some supplements or food instead of money. This way, they would be more accepting. Poplar Fruit had lived with Fang Beibei for so long, so of course, he could understand the meaning behind Fang Beibei's words. "We don't lack money at home." Father Fang misunderstood. He nodded and said in agreement, "Beibei is right. Instead of giving money, why don't you come back to visit us more often? Seeing all of you happy is our greatest happiness." Chapter 1135. On the 6th day of the new year, Poplar Fruit and his family took a plane to Beijing during the rush hour of the Spring Festival. It was not difficult to book the plane tickets. Poplar Fruit bought a first-class seat that would never be empty. When they arrived in Beijing, Zhang Yujie, who hadn't gone to work in Yangcheng, picked them up. After all, Zhang Yujie was the boss of a publishing house. Other than a workaholic like herself, Who else could control her work hours? However, Zheng Yujie did not stay to accompany Poplar Fruit, because she knew that the woman who accompanied Poplar Fruit to the award ceremony would not be her. Instead of feeling sad, she might as well devote all her energy to work. On the third day, Zheng Yujie flew to the United States to discuss the cooperation agreement with Amazon for the new year. The influence of teacher Mo Yang's books on the international market had been greatly weakened. Granny Monroe's books were selling well, but it was not enough to affect Amazon's decision to cooperate with New Translation Road. This year, other domestic publishing giants were eyeing this emerging market for books. Many of them planned to copy New Translation Road's steps and forcibly enter and divide the cake. Amazon had a lot more choices. Therefore, according to the feedback they had collected, they were starting to have some opinions about the terms of the previous cooperation. This time, Zheng Yujie went there mainly to see if Amazon still intended to treat New Translation Road as a strategic partner. Strategic partners would have a lot of support and sales promotion. If they really had a change of heart, New Translation Road's strategic deployment in the new year would change greatly. Zheng Yujie was not afraid of Amazon. She was not worried about parting ways with Amazon. Zheng Yujie and Poplar Fruit had no choice but to start from scratch. However, things were different now. New Translation Road had completely established a reputation around the world. Previously, they had been paying attention to the brand strategy, which was enough to give New Translation Road the ability to start anew and return to the independent publishing industry. Not to mention other things, the logo of New Translation Road and Poplar Fruit's name were enough for them to move around the world unhindered. This was a bit like the Harry Potter series back in the day, where people already had blind trust in J.K. Rowling. As long as it was a book written by her, there was no reason why it would not sell well. In fact, the first book after the Harry Potter series, excluding the books related to Harry Potter, Casual Vacancy, was a great success. The second book, The Cuckoo's Call, even under a different pen name, was still selling well. Of course, this was also related to Ms. Rowling's own strength. However, Poplar Fruit's translation skills and the number and quality of the fantasy novels published by New Translation Road Publishing House had indeed given readers all over the world a psychological hint: choosing me is definitely the right choice. Since they had this influence, the new company could establish itself. They did not even have to worry about Amazon falling out with them. This was not in line with Amazon's philosophy. After all, they were only doing e-commerce channels and not publishing houses. The library was just a very small project. In front of the sales volume of New Translation Road's books, they had no reason not to cooperate with New Translation Road. Moreover, it was actually better for New Translation Road to be independent because this way, its books did not only need to be sold through Amazon's channels. It could use channels all over the world. Of course, there were also risks in making rash changes. Although the higher-ups of New Translation Road had already discussed it during the meeting, Poplar Fruit generally did not attend, and had already started preparing silently. Who could predict whether they would fail because of changes? Pang Yu had raised such a concern, but Zheng Yujie's next sentence filled everyone with confidence. What's there to be afraid of? We have the capital to make a comeback. If we fail, we will just go back to 2 years ago and start all over again. The so-called capital was mainly referring to Poplar Fruit. Not to mention the sales volume of this guy's translated books, with his translation speed and translation skills, he was equivalent to 7 or 8 pillars of other publishing houses in New Translation Road. If this was not stable, then there was nothing more stable. Of course, this still depended on how Zheng Yujie went to Amazon this time. At 8 p.m. on February 27th, Central TV officially started the live broadcast of this year's Touching China Awards ceremony. Of course, Poplar Fruit and the others also attended, but it was not too grand. For example, Fong Beibei did not wear a heavy evening gown. They were young people, so it was understandable for them to dress youthful and energetic. These were not the main points, because in fact, the camera would not frequently be focused on Poplar Fruit and the others. However, every time the camera focused on their table, Poplar Fruit's fans on Weibo would be excited for a while because they saw the handsome Poplar Fruit and the beautiful and cute Kiki. Today, Kiki was very quiet because of the occasion. She sat obediently beside her father. In the eyes of the netizens, This was another kind of charm that attracted them. The award ceremony was conducted in an orderly manner under the auspices of the two big hosts of Central TV. The program's ratings had dropped a lot in recent years, but this time, it had improved a lot. This improvement was mainly due to Poplar Fruit's fans. To them, what they really wanted to see was Poplar Fruit's scenes. However, for Poplar Fruit, he sat below the stage and did not look forward to receiving the award. That was because watching one touching story after another was actually a kind of baptism for him. He really treated himself as an ordinary audience member. He listened sincerely, clapped hard, and shed tears of gratitude. Once, the cameraman even unknowingly took him as a touched audience member and captured him on camera. It also appeared on thousands of televisions. This scene was just a flash, but it was still discovered by Poplar Fruit's fans and they quickly took screenshots. However, most of the ordinary audience did not realize that the handsome young man who wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes in the camera was actually one of today's award winners. Poplar Fruit did not care what others thought of him. He was just being himself. Moreover, Poplar Fruit did not know that his words and actions had affected Kiki, who was sitting beside him. Kiki also watched seriously. Maybe she did not understand it, but she would remember it. One day, she would understand and germinate. Finally, it was Poplar Fruit's turn. Under the guidance of the staff, Poplar Fruit waited backstage. He used to be a supermodel. Because of his stunning performance at the Bali Fashion Week, the world began to recognize and accept models from China. He was a student and scholar. His talent was favored by Harvard University, and the theories he researched made the world redefine the Chinese language. It was also the beginning of the Chinese language to the world. Teacher Jing Yi Dan stood in front of the stage, using gentle and pleasant Mandarin to begin a powerful introduction. Chapter 1136. He is a translator. Among his translations, 2 Nobel Prize winners walked out. He also made the world go crazy for Chinese web novels. He is also a teacher, or rather, a philanthropist. He initiated the remote teaching model and public welfare activities, which allowed better and more equal education to reach poor areas. He is also a great hero in people's hearts. He dared to fight 8 terrifying armed thugs with his bare hands and saved many lives. It is difficult to define him clearly because he has always been refreshing people's understanding of him. He also used his tireless efforts and achievements to impact the hearts of the people. After Jing Yi Dan teacher's introduction, there was a 7-minute video introduction. In this video, some of it was recorded by the TV station after Poplar Fruit returned to Guangzhou. Most of it was recorded by Central TV from Higoshiyama University, the Remote Teaching Association, and other channels. It was a more comprehensive introduction of Poplar Fruit's glorious deeds. Of course, Central TV's tear-jerking editing techniques were already at the pinnacle of perfection. This video was also very compelling. The viewers could not help but open their mouths in shock. Poplar Fruit was also a little surprised when he saw it. This was because he knew that the video was not false. However, he never thought that he was actually this outstanding, or rather, Poplar Fruit never thought about it. This was because he never looked back and was always looking forward. Let's welcome Poplar Fruit. As Jing Yi Dan Master's voice fell, Yang Guo walked out from the left end of the high zigzag stage. So young. Amidst the vigorous applause, there were always a few such exclamations. Indeed, as long as Poplar Fruit wore a slim-fit suit, his youthful and handsome face would be even more prominent. Kiki in the audience had been looking forward to it for a long time. When she saw her father come out, she clapped with all her might. This support was not small. Kiki's white and tender little face was flushed with excitement. Poplar Fruit walked down the stairs with steady steps. The modeling training he received was already engraved in his bones. Although he did not have the catwalk of a model, his body and steps had an indescribable charm. In front of the stage, Poplar Fruit bowed to the audience before he came to Bai Yensong's tea table on the right. The two sat opposite each other with their bodies slightly tilted to the audience. Yang Guo, I've always been curious about a question. Maybe it's also a question that most of the audience wants to ask. How did you achieve so many achievements in academia, translation, public service, and other fields in just a few years? Teacher Bai Yangsong directly threw out the question without any small talk. Poplar Fruit smiled faintly and said, I think on one hand, I rely on talent. My language talent and learning ability are indeed very strong. On the other hand, it is hard work. Those who are familiar with basketball should know that Kobe once said, do you know what Los Angeles looks like at 4 in the morning? Actually, it's the same for me. I clearly remember what it looks like at 4 in the morning in Guangzhou. Bai Yangsong took the lead and led the audience to applaud Poplar Fruit's words. Why did you want to come back to your motherland to continue academic research in the field of languages? You should know that when you stood on the stage of the BA Lee Fashion Week, it could be said that you were very successful. Even the reporters said that you had made a peak performance. Why did you choose to withdraw from the rapids and turn to the boring research work that doesn't attract much attention? Bai Yangsong asked. Because of interest. Poplar Fruit laughed heartily and said, becoming a supermodel is actually to fulfill a promise to a friend. I have already worked hard and achieved good results. That is enough. Besides, academic research is not boring for me. On the contrary, because of my love for languages and translation, I find it more interesting. People have to take advantage of their youth to do what they want to do and what they like to do. Only then will they not have any regrets in life. Bai Yangsong nodded and asked, while you're doing your research, you've also started a charity event like remote teaching. As far as I know, your personal donation has already exceeded 200 million. Why are you willing to donate so much money that you've worked so hard to earn? Poplar Fruit pondered for a moment and said, there is no complicated reason. In fact, our family's pursuit of money is not that high. It's not that we don't have it, but it is enough for us. A few 100,000 or a few million is enough for us to live a good life. If the rest of the money is piled up in the bank, it is just a string of numbers. But if it is used to help others, it can make more people live a better life. When I discussed it with my girlfriend, we both felt that it was a good thing to donate to charity, so we did it. She is now doing a charity activity for stray pets. On the one hand, she is saving them. On the other hand, she is helping them find families that can adopt and care for them. Poplar Fruit smiled and said. He gently turned his head and looked at Fong Beibei. The director accurately gave Fong Beibei a shot. Last March at the Kunming train station, you faced 8 armed criminals alone and bravely rushed forward. What were your thoughts at that time? Were you afraid? Bai Yangsong asked. Poplar Fruit shook his head without hesitation and said, no, I never thought of being afraid. Because when the crowd began to stir, the first thing I thought of was to protect my daughter, girlfriend, and friends who were traveling with me. First, I solved the crisis in the temporary waiting room at the station. Then, I had time to fight with the thugs in the station hall. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, I knew that there were 4 or 5 thugs at that time. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. There was a certain possibility of injury. But I also knew that if I didn't go and entangle them, allowing them to continue like this, there would definitely be more casualties. So I still went up. Poplar Fruit's words once again received thunderous applause. After the applause stopped, Bai Yangsong continued to ask, Poplar Fruit, you are not even 30 years old, and you have achieved so many excellent achievements. So, what dreams do you have for the future? Or, what heights do you want to reach? This question was a bit difficult, and Poplar Fruit could not say it too lightly. However, these questions had been discussed before, so Poplar Fruit just thought for a moment and said, actually, I have always had a dream, which is to let more excellent literary works of our country go abroad and let the whole world like Chinese culture. But it is very difficult to realize this dream, and it is not only possible for me to achieve it alone. It needs more writers, linguists, and translators to work together. The popularity of Chinese online novels promoted by New Translation Road Publishing House is one of our efforts. My research on the theory of translation and the theory of Chinese learning is also one of our efforts. Poplar Fruit said calmly, so, we can't say that we have succeeded, but we have seen a promising dawn on the road to realizing our dreams. In the future, of course, I will continue to work hard and move toward this goal. Chapter 1137. When teacher Jing Yidan finished reading the award speech, the pillar-like big screen seemed to be pulled down like a curtain. The two golden words "Poplar Fruit" shone in front of the audience. Poplar Fruit walked to the front desk and received the trophy and flowers from two primary school students wearing red scarves. People on the internet and in front of the TV also applauded. In front of another TV, a thin man was sitting in front of the TV with a lunchbox. He had forgotten to eat because he was watching Poplar Fruit's award ceremony. The bean sprouts inside were a little cold. "Uncle Xie, what do you think? What a good gimmick. Inviting one of the top 10 figures of the year who touched China to participate in our show. You have to know that he's not an ordinary person. Even if we put aside his previous experience as a model, he's still a public figure." Teacher He began to nag in front of producer Xie again. Producer Xie's age was actually very different from his appearance. It was still okay now, but in the past, no matter how others looked at him, they would feel that he was a generation older than them. So as everyone in the station called him that, the title of Uncle Xie was dropped. "Don't be in a hurry to eat." Teacher He laughed and said, "You're always eating takeout. Why don't I treat you to a drink outside?" He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of Poplar Fruit receiving the award to persuade the hesitant producer Xie. "No, I have to work overtime later." "Teacher He, I say, what's the relationship between you and Poplar Fruit? Why do you keep recommending him?" Producer Xie raised his eyebrows and asked doubtfully. Producer Xie naturally wouldn't question teacher He's character since they had been colleagues for decades. He just wanted to give himself some peace and quiet. "What kind of relationship? Didn't he appear on my show once before? Then I got to know this young man very well, especially his daughter. Did you see her on TV just now? She's grown up into a big girl." Teacher He said long-windedly, "Who knows how many people on the internet are looking forward to seeing the father and daughter on the show." "I know what you're saying." Producer Xie sighed and said, "Aren't I hesitating?" "Why are you hesitating, Mister?" he asked like a curious baby. Producer Xie nudged him and said with a smile, Okay. Don't try to pry into my intentions. Before the final name list is confirmed, I won't tell anyone. Hurry up, go and prepare for your program. Anyway, I already know your opinion. I didn't say no, right? I'll let you know as soon as I make a decision." Teacher He had no choice but to nod and leave Producer Xie's office. A long time after Teacher He left, Producer Xie put down the lunchbox in his hand and took out a stack of documents from the drawer on the other side. There was a piece of paper with a few names written on it. Poplar Fruit's name was also on the list. "It's hard to choose a girl's family." Producer Xie sighed softly. In fact, in the settings of Where Are We Going, Daddy, the number of boys was more than the number of girls. The second season was a special case because Cao Ji brought 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl, and as a result, the ratio of boys to girls was evened out. Later, it turned out that the ratio of boys to girls was not a good thing because little boys were more lively after all, and if there were more girls, it would not be easy to allocate their share of the screen time. This season, Producer Xie pondered for a long time and decided to use a more daring combination of 4 boys and 1 girl. Just like in Run, Brother, a little red in the midst of a lot of green. This would highlight the characteristics of the show more. In this way, the choice of the girl had to be very, very careful. Because she was the only girl character, if she did not shine, the entire show would collapse. It was also because of this reason that producer Xie had been having a headache and had not decided on the final name list. In his mind, the best girl character should be as cute, sensible, and liked as Huang Duoduo in the second season, but it would be best if she was not as old as Duoduo. Of course, this was just a thought. He did not have many choices. How could there be such a perfect candidate? Poplar Fruit and his daughter, Kiki, had actually been in producer Xie's sights since the online discussion and teacher his recommendation last year. To be honest, producer Xie also felt that Poplar Fruit's father was impeccable. He watched the show where Poplar Fruit went on the fast track, and how Poplar Fruit accidentally entered the scene of the Korean variety show, Running_Man. He realized that Poplar Fruit was more suitable for variety shows because he had a glib tongue, had experienced legends, and was able to enjoy himself. Most importantly, Poplar Fruit knew how to share. He would not deliberately hog the screen time, and would even fight for the other guests' screen time. This was a very good quality of variety shows. If this show was called Daddy, and was a show with fathers as the main characters, then producer Xie would definitely choose Poplar Fruit without a doubt. However, the father was only a supporting character in this show. The real main characters were the cute children, so he had to focus on whether Kiki was suitable. Producer Xie asked the staff to collect a lot of photos and videos of Kiki. Other than the photos from other media outlets, most of them were taken from Poplar Fruit's Weibo and filled up a USB flash drive. If Poplar Fruit did not know and knew that someone was spying on Kiki like this, he would definitely beat him up. More than 2 years ago, Kiki was still a little shy when she participated in the fast track. However, under Poplar Fruit's guidance, she performed very well. However, that was more than 2 years ago. Who knew what would happen now? Now, Kiki was still very cute in the videos posted on Poplar Fruit's Weibo. The warmth between the father and daughter made many netizens envious. However, this had little to do with whether or not she could participate in the show, because children would be very natural in front of their families. However, if the environment changed, it might be really difficult for them to adapt. It was not that Kiki was not good. Kiki was very good, and producer Xie was willing to give such a cute little girl a chance. However, there was now a choice in front of him, which made it difficult for producer Xie to choose. Xia Kelly and his daughter. Xia Kelly was a foreigner, but he had been a show host in Taiwan. He spoke Chinese very well, which was very attractive in publicity. His daughter was of mixed Chinese and Canadian descent. She was very beautiful and was 2 years older than Kiki. Therefore, she would be more sensible. One must know that if Kiki really recorded the show, she would only be a little over 4 years old. She would be about the same as Angela when she was young. Angela was difficult to please, not derogatory, which made her father and the show's crew very troubled. Besides, Xia Kelly was a foreigner. Maybe he could expand the influence of the show to the world. In this way, it seemed that he had another advantage. Now was not the time to finalize the list. Producer Xie wanted to wait and think about it again. Chapter 1138. Although school was about to start, after the award ceremony, Poplar Fruit still stayed in Beijing for a week. One of the reasons was because he wanted to participate in the Date with Luyu interview program. The program was recorded in the Shijingshan area of Beijing, and he also needed to strengthen his relationship with the Beijing Education Department and several university professors. There was no need to elaborate on the interview program. After all, it was just Poplar Fruit's previous experience. On the other hand, the communication between Beijing and the Ministry of Education was more interesting. Under the promotion of the state apparatus, Tanzania, Congo, and China established an educational cooperation. Yang Guo did not know if there was an exchange of interests, but the speed was very fast. In just a few months, they had already established a few distance education service points in Congo. This was what Poplar Fruit mentioned. According to the local environment and actual situation, small service points similar to highway service areas were built near poor villages. Not only did they provide free remote education services, but they also invited the medical team sent by the state and other NGOs to be stationed there. Safety was a big issue, but after negotiating with the United Nations and the Congo government, the peacekeeping force and the government army would also take responsibility for protecting the safety of civilians. These similar service points would gradually spread throughout the Congo in the next 1 or 2 years. Whether it was education, medical assistance, or the Congo government's own stability of the country, it could play a very good role. In fact, it was not just Congo. According to Poplar Fruit's understanding, Sudan, Cameroon, Kenya, Guinea, Angola, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and so on, from this year onwards, countries were preparing to cooperate with each other in education. This could be seen from the path of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs' visit to Africa last month. Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't know much about the political aspect, and he didn't think much about it. After all, Poplar Fruit was not a diplomat or a government official, so there was no need for him to worry about it. Yang Guo, on the other hand, was happy for Mukaru. After the winter break, Mukaru flew back to Tanzania with China's support team. After that, he was busy between Tanzania and Congo. He played the role of a bridge, but Mukaru still did his best to help the people of his hometown. After chatting with Mukaru online for a while, Mukaru started to treat Yongguo as a great benefactor of Bodhisattva. In order to repay Mukaru's gratitude, Poplar Fruit also agreed to record a complete Chinese language course for Mukaru, who preferred Chinese culture. It was still using his new theory, but it had to be taught in the local language. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had learned several African languages in the past few months, such as Kiswahili, Lingala, and Hausa. These languages were the most commonly used languages in the African continent. Knowing these languages, French, English, and Arabic, one would be able to move freely in the various cities in Africa. Of course, with Higoshiyama University's meager background, it was impossible to find these unpopular language learning materials. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had a good relationship with the professors at Beijing International Studies University, so he asked them for some materials. Together with some training materials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was enough for Poplar Fruit to learn. Actually, learning a language at Poplar Fruit's level was not as painful as learning other languages. After all, languages were basically the same. For example, Hausa was a Semitic language, similar to Arabic. Lingala and Kiswahili were both Bantu languages. Although there were definitely some differences, as long as one learned one, the other would become very simple. It was like learning Cantonese after learning Sichuan. It was just a walk between different dialects. Moreover, these small countries in Africa didn't have as long a history as China. Naturally, their languages wouldn't be as developed as China's. In the vocabulary, the words he invented were only a small part. Most of it was taken up by French, English, and other foreign words. In this way, for Poplar Fruit, the cost of learning was further reduced. In addition to these omnivorous foods, Poplar Fruit's main reason for staying in Beijing was to celebrate Fong Beibei's birthday. When it came to choosing a birthday gift, Poplar Fruit certainly would not stupidly give Fong Beibei a trophy that touched the top 10 people in China as a gift. It was not some NBA championship ring, right? For this gift, Poplar Fruit had been preparing since the beginning of the year. As for what he gave, it was a little sweetness between the couple. He did not want to say it out loud so that everyone would be jealous. However, on the last night in Beijing, just as Poplar Fruit was about to go home, Poplar Fruit received a call from Professor Mills in the United States. Poplar Fruit was still very respectful to this mentor on his path of giving speeches. He put down the clothes in his hand and left them to Fong Beibei and the troublemaker Kiki. Poplar Fruit went to the hotel corridor to answer the call. In fact, Professor Mills did not look for Poplar Fruit himself. He was only asked by someone to invite Poplar Fruit. Invite. The biggest friendship between Poplar Fruit and Professor Mills originated from speeches. It also developed because of speeches. Previously on the plane, Professor Mills once said that the founder of TED, Mr. Anderson, was his good friend. Professor Mills was asked by Mr. Anderson to invite Poplar Fruit to this year's TED conference. There was no need to go into too much detail about TED. After all, in recent years, the educational channels of several video websites, or rather, the public lecture channels, had a lot of content filled with videos of TED Talks. The Chinese people's understanding of TED was no longer as ignorant as it was a few years ago. However, many people didn't know that although TED videos were updated from time to time, the most exciting speech videos were definitely from the TED conference in March every year. Speakers, thinkers, or leaders from all over the world gave their speeches. Poplar Fruit liked watching TED speech videos very much, not only because he needed to learn how to give speeches, but also because there were many very interesting and even valuable ideas in them. Poplar Fruit was a little surprised to be invited by Mr. Anderson. However, after Professor Mills explained a little, Poplar Fruit also understood why Mr. Anderson invited him. You are the founder of future education. This model of distance education is really amazing. Although we advocate face-to-face exchange education, there is no doubt that your education model does indeed allow some poor and backward countries to enjoy the benefits of education, Professor Mills said to Poplar Fruit. Of course, He knew about Poplar Fruit's distance education. When Poplar Fruit asked him for advice before, they talked about the content of his speech. Poplar Fruit's speech videos in school were also translated by some international students and had received a lot of attention. Perhaps Mr. Anderson also learned about him from Professor Mills. However, Poplar Fruit did not know that the title of the founder of future education was not an exaggeration by Professor Mills. It was a title that the American academic community gave to Poplar Fruit. Come on, Leon, the TED conference needs your beautiful ideas. Let's use ideas to change the world together, Professor Mills persuaded. Chapter 1139. Before it was time to leave for California, Poplar Fruit started to study the script of his TED speech. By right, Poplar Fruit's speech should have no problems. Moreover, he had gone through 100 lecture tours last year, so he could just copy it. However, a TED speech was different. It only had 18 minutes to express one's thoughts. It was not a lecture tour that could easily last 1 or 2 hours. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's target audience was mainly people from Western countries. Although the language was not a problem, it was obvious that Chinese speech logic would not be popular. Therefore, Poplar Fruit had to make a lot of changes and preparations. On the weekend, Poplar Fruit and Kiki took Gold and Big Motor for a walk in the neighborhood park. Zhang Yujie had encountered some problems in the negotiations with Amazon in the United States. Therefore, she stayed in the United States for the time being and was prepared to discuss with other channels. Therefore, Poplar Fruit had to go to her house to pick up Big Motor. After all, it was not a good idea for a nanny to take care of it all the time. The nanny would only take care of Big Motor's daily needs. She would definitely not take it out for walks like the owner. Kiki was the happiest when Big Motor came home. That was because she had another gentle and powerful ride. Although Big Motor was a little old, it had been well taken care of by Zhang Yujie for the past year. It could even carry Fong Beibei, let alone Kiki. Moreover, although it looked bigger than Gold, its fluffy fur and lazy appearance did not make people feel afraid. In comparison, the energetic Gold was a good playmate. However, it was not a good ride. When Kiki wanted to ride Big Motor on its back, Gold wriggled restlessly. This made Kiki very unhappy. I don't like Gold anymore. Gold is not obedient. Kiki pouted and complained to her father. Poplar Fruit smiled in his heart. He knew the reason. He thought to himself, it's mainly because you've grown up. Only Big Motor had a strong physique and a gentle personality. Otherwise, who would be able to carry him? Jin Zi is exhausted. However, in the evening, Yang Guo received a phone call and her brows furrowed. Zhang Mingsheng wanted to see him. Why did Zhang Mingsheng want to see him? Poplar Fruit was not stupid enough to think that Zhang Mingsheng wanted to see him because he received the award for touching the top 10 people of China. Although Poplar Fruit returned from Beijing, there was no need for a provincial governor and governor like Zhang Mingsheng to meet Poplar Fruit for such a small matter. There was no friendship between them. It seemed that they had not met many times. It was even less than the number of times that Poplar Fruit saw Commander He Jiuming at Big Brother his house. The latter cared for Poplar Fruit very much. On the one hand, it was because of the close relationship between Poplar Fruit and He Wanjua. On the other hand, it was also because of Poplar Fruit's good skills and contributions to the defense of the motherland and the safety of the people's property. Suddenly receiving a notice from Zhang Mingsheng's secretary, Poplar Fruit's mood was uneasy. He did not know why. Perhaps it was because he was Zhang Yujie's father. With such a nervous mood, Poplar Fruit was a little absent-minded when he had a meeting with several students from the remote teaching club at school the next morning. It was in the afternoon when they arrived at the provincial party committee. Zhang Mingsheng was very busy. In front of Poplar Fruit, there was a municipal party secretary who rushed over to report to Zhang Mingsheng. After entering, the secretary did not make tea for Poplar Fruit. Instead, he closed the door and left. Zhang Mingsheng looked up at Poplar Fruit, pointed to the sofa chair in front of his desk, and said, "Sit." His tone was neither cold nor warm, but it faintly revealed the authority of a high-ranking official. Poplar Fruit sat down a little awkwardly, and then he was examined by Zhang Mingsheng for 3 minutes. In these 3 minutes, Yang Guo's mood was like riding a roller coaster, from apprehension to violent upheaval. But, miraculously, he suddenly calmed down in the end. Not only his expression, but Poplar Fruit's eyes also became calm. He did not know why, but he did not seem to be afraid of Zheng Mingsheng. Instead, he had a calmness of block soldiers with arms, water with earthware. After Poplar Fruit's expression changed, Zheng Mingsheng looked deeply at Poplar Fruit, and he sighed in his heart. Quite a good young man. Zheng Mingsheng did not regret it, but he still had some regrets. He thought about how Poplar Fruit appeared in front of the Zheng family like a hothead, and how the Zheng family disdained him. Deng Baoyang even ran to Poplar Fruit's hotel and made a scene. However, later they found out that their daughter and the other party were just friends. The so-called boyfriend and girlfriend relationship was fake. At that time, Poplar Fruit should not have a girlfriend, right? However, they did not expect that the hothead at that time would grow to such a level in just a few years. Although they did not go into politics or business, they could not stop Poplar Fruit's rapid academic progress. The Zheng family could look down on him and secretly scold him for being a lowly scholar. However, Poplar Fruit's achievement of being received by the country's leaders and being awarded by Central TV's touching China's top 10 awards, the Zheng family could no longer ignore Poplar Fruit. Yes, in the Zheng family's eyes, Poplar Fruit was as outstanding as a hot steamed bun. Even Deng Baoyang, who looked down on Poplar Fruit the most, began to think that Poplar Fruit met the Zheng family's criteria for a son-in-law. Unfortunately, you looked down on him back then. Now, Poplar Fruit is already taken. During the new year, when Zheng Yujie was not present, the Zheng family discussed whether they should let Zheng Yujie take the initiative. Poplar Fruit was a good match for Zheng Yujie. More importantly, Zheng Yujie liked Poplar Fruit. The child's happiness is more important than anything else. This was said by Zheng Mingsheng's sister-in-law. This was a world of difference from what she said when she looked down on Poplar Fruit. However, just as everyone was praising Poplar Fruit, Zheng Mingsheng clearly opposed Zheng Yujie and Poplar Fruit being together. Old Master Zheng Huakang was still alive, but he rarely made any decisions for the family. Zheng Mingsheng had become the head of the family, and his words were like an imperial edict that could not be disobeyed. Zheng Mingsheng opposed Poplar Fruit. Deng Baoyang was surprised. When everyone was against it, it was Zheng Mingsheng who was willing to give Yang Guo a chance. In fact, he didn't agree, didn't oppose, and didn't interfere. Now, Zheng Mingsheng's attitude had changed 180 degrees. What was the reason? Only Zheng Mingsheng knew the reason. Because it was impossible between Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie. Zheng Mingsheng, who had been in charge of politics in Guangdong province for 2 years, knew the relationship between Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie best. It was absolutely clean. No one had crossed the line. Zheng Mingsheng even asked people to investigate the whereabouts of Poplar Fruit. In the communication between Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, except for the more frequent work contact, the two basically had few private contacts. If there was really an affair, how could it be like this? Chapter 1140. If it could be done, how could he object? To be honest, when he came to Guangdong province, Poplar Fruit had not yet become the general trend. Although he was a little famous, he was still not in the Zheng family's eyes. However, Zheng Mingsheng still had a good impression of Poplar Fruit at that time. He was a down-to-earth scholar, not impetuous, and had a good height and appearance. Such a boy was rare. However, no matter how good he was, he could not become the son-in-law of the Zheng family. It was not that Zheng Mingsheng did not like him, but the fact that Poplar Fruit already had a girlfriend made Zheng Mingsheng very conflicted. At that time, Zheng Mingsheng had just come to Guangdong province, and it was not easy for him to control the officialdom of Guangdong province, so he did not spare the energy to deal with Poplar Fruit and his daughter's matter. Then, when he took a nap, Poplar Fruit had already grown to such a level. Not to mention whether he was a hero or not, just his word-splitting was enough to make Poplar Fruit a national expert and scholar, and the kind that enjoyed special subsidies from the State Council. Of course, Poplar Fruit did not have this benefit yet. After all, he was too young. Damn the age discrimination, wasn't it? It was also because of this reason that even Zheng Mingsheng had to take Poplar Fruit's influence seriously. However, Poplar Fruit was still the same as before, and his relationship with his girlfriend was very good. This was obvious to all the people in the country. The relationship between Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei had gone from all kinds of controversies to an immortal couple in the eyes of the people now. This also meant that his daughter was out of the picture. Even if Zheng Yujie did not give up, Zheng Mingsheng did not want his daughter to be someone else's mistress, or to break up Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei, causing both sides to be scolded. Poplar Fruit could not bear it, and the Zheng family could not bear it either. So today, Zheng Mingsheng took time out of his busy schedule to find this brat and start a showdown. You should persuade Yujie. Don't let her continue to be stubborn with her family. She's not young anymore. If she continues to be entangled with you, it won't be good for anyone. Zheng Mingsheng looked at Poplar Fruit's young face and said these words with heartache. Yes, he couldn't force Poplar Fruit to cut off contact with Zheng Yujie. That was impossible. Not to mention the value created by the new translation road, its influence in the world made countries look askance. Last year, several major departments in the country had put on a demonstration of the new translation route. Even Zheng Mingsheng, as her father, could not interfere with Zheng Yujie's company. The only solution was to let Zheng Yujie let go herself, and only Poplar Fruit could do this. Zheng Yujie was stubborn. Even if Zheng Mingsheng tried to persuade her, it was useless. Once she decided on something, she would do it without looking back. If he tried to persuade her, it would only anger Zheng Yujie and make her even more stubborn. Poplar Fruit was different. If Poplar Fruit could be more resolute, maybe Zheng Yujie would really let go. Although it would break her heart, who didn't have such a growth experience? Even if it was broken, it could still be fixed. It might not be perfect, but it was only marriage and love. In the few aristocratic families in Beijing, which child's marriage and love were perfect? Poplar Fruit was silent. From the moment Zheng Mingsheng opened his mouth, he had been silent. Zheng Mingsheng even put down his arrogance as the provincial party secretary to Poplar Fruit to analyze what kind of pain Zheng Yujie would face if Poplar Fruit let Zheng Yujie drag on like this. On one hand, it was the coercion from her family. On the other hand, it was the strange looks from the outside world. But most of all, it was the harm that Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei's happiness brought to Zheng Yujie. Poplar Fruit did not listen to any of this. His silence and unmoving eyes concealed the fluctuations in his heart. Zheng Yujie was a name that held a lot of weight in Poplar Fruit's heart. Although it was not as important as Fong Beibei, it was not as simple as an ordinary female friend. Her uniqueness surpassed all the women around the same age as Poplar Fruit except for Fong Beibei. In other words, Poplar Fruit actually had feelings for Zheng Yujie. Humans were not plants. Poplar Fruit was not a saint who would abandon his feelings for the country. Zheng Yujie's love for him had always been naked. Even after 4 years, this love had not faded. Instead, because of the precipitation of time, because of Poplar Fruit's rejection and attacks, it had become more mellow. However, even if Poplar Fruit admitted that he did have feelings for Zheng Yujie, it would not change anything. With Yang Guo's personality, she didn't allow herself to be half-hearted in her relationship. She also didn't allow herself to hurt Fang Beibei because of her half-heartedness. Perhaps, this relationship was a mistake from the very beginning. However, when he thought of having a showdown with Zheng Yujie, Poplar Fruit felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Although he suppressed it very well, it was undeniable that this kind of pain was a little like the heart-wrenching pain when Lu Yunran left on a rainy night. Why is this? Poplar Fruit shook his head self-mockingly in his heart. Perhaps it was a man's inherent weakness. Since ancient times, whether it was the nobles, generals, ministers, or commoners, all men wanted to embrace all the beauty in their arms, especially beautiful women. Although Poplar Fruit could use feelings to ward off the desire in his heart, he knew that it was wrong to do so. On the one hand, it would hurt Fong Beibei, the girl he loved the most. On the other hand, wouldn't it hurt Zheng Yujie? Poplar Fruit could not give Zheng Yujie the love she wanted, and he could not give her the status she needed after loving her. Even without mentioning these, Poplar Fruit could not bear to see her look at him in a daze again and again as he left. Poplar Fruit never dared to look back. Ahem. Zheng Mingxing deliberately coughed to wake Poplar Fruit from his chaotic thoughts. He looked at Poplar Fruit with a somewhat unfriendly gaze. This hateful brat, how dare he be distracted in front of me? If it were not for Poplar Fruit's special status, Zheng Mingxing would have slapped him to death and let him know the consequences of being distracted in front of the provincial secretary. Poplar Fruit came back to his senses. He looked at Zheng Mingxing and continued to listen to his persuasion. Zheng Mingxing was indeed eloquent, but even if he had a glib tongue, the balance in Poplar Fruit's heart still needed to be tilted. I understand. Poplar Fruit suddenly said, taking advantage of the time when Zheng Mingxing was tired and drinking water to interrupt. Zheng Mingxing signaled him to say it. Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Mingxing seriously and said, when Yujie comes back, I will explain it to her clearly and not delay her happiness. Poplar Fruit did not want to say too much. He did not need to report to Zheng Mingxing how he was going to tell Zheng Yujie, he had not thought of it yet. But Zheng Mingxing was already satisfied. What he needed was Poplar Fruit's decision. He also knew that Poplar Fruit was a man of his word. Chapter 1141. Without waiting for Zheng Yujie to return, Poplar Fruit flew to Canada, which was on the other side of the ocean. It had been a year since they last met. Poplar Fruit purposely went a few days earlier to visit grandmother Menluo on the way. This time, Fong Beibei and Kiki didn't go with him, so Poplar Fruit went to a foreign country alone. Poplar Fruit wasn't very worried about this, because he could communicate smoothly wherever he went, let alone in Canada, where English and French were the main languages. Vancouver was a city with more Chinese people. Walking on the streets, he could see Chinese faces and hear Chinese voices, which made Poplar Fruit feel particularly close. In particular, when he was buying something in a convenience store, he was recognized by the local Chinese. The person who recognized Poplar Fruit was a third-generation Chinese immigrant. He was a very young man, about 17 or 18 years old, and his Mandarin accent was very awkward. He introduced himself as Bert Li. Of course, Poplar Fruit later found out that he was also of Caucasian descent. His mother was Caucasian. His father's name was Blake Li, and his Chinese name was Li Dazhuang. He was a second-generation immigrant who was born and raised in Canada. However, perhaps because he often communicated with his elders in Chinese, Li Dazhuang's Mandarin was not bad. What surprised Poplar Fruit was that Bert Li could recognize him, not because he had appeared on the stage of Bali Fashion Week, nor was it because he had been covered by the world's major media because of his heroic actions at Kunming train station. It was because of his Chinese, and it was because of the Chinese teaching video that Poplar Fruit had recorded. Bert Li used to hate learning Chinese, and we couldn't do anything about it. Li Dazhuang smiled and said to Poplar Fruit, later, I heard that there was such a very simple teaching video on the internet, so I asked him to watch it. After all, our motherland and Chinese are the roots of our Chinese. Now, I see that his learning effect is very good. In the past, it was difficult to learn, and I couldn't understand just by listening to the lecture. That's why I didn't want to learn. Now that it's easier, I'm not the only one. A few of my classmates have started to say that they want to learn to speak Chinese. Bert defended himself, but he was speaking in English. His Chinese hearing was no longer a problem, but he was still lacking in speaking. Haha, Bert, it's okay. You have to be bold and say it. Language can only be practiced by speaking, Poplar Fruit encouraged with a smile. Not to mention, Bert quite worshipped Yang Guo. He immediately used an awkward accent and said word by word, Brother Leon, I searched for you on the internet. You're the best. As it turned out, after Bert studied, he went to Wikipedia to look for information about Poplar Fruit, only to find out that Poplar Fruit had already done a lot of shocking thing. After chatting with them for a while, Poplar Fruit returned to his hotel. This little episode was quite interesting, and Poplar Fruit gained a lot of confidence from it. So, my efforts have already been influenced and changed overseas. Although Bert was Chinese, from his feedback, Poplar Fruit could feel that the Chinese learning theory of the word-splitting method was indeed acceptable to foreign people. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before not only Chinese people, but other people would also join the ranks of Chinese learning, and more people would learn to speak Chinese. On March 16, The TED conference finally opened. Poplar Fruit's speech was scheduled for the next day, so on the first day, Poplar Fruit would go to the venue to listen to other speakers' speeches. The opportunity to listen to a speech live was very rare. If he wasn't a speaker himself, he would have to spend $7,500 to listen to a speech live. The theme of this year's TED conference was Truth and Dare, which was translated into Chinese as Truth or Dare, or Truth and Courage. The main purpose of this conference was to explore the commonly known truth, to present a deeper level of analysis and a richer understanding, so that new ideas with revolutionary significance could be excavated. Courage was the power to put aside old traditions and promote innovation. People needed to make brave changes to truly create the future. There were many novel and interesting ideas shared by the speakers at the conference. The speakers here were not necessarily real speakers, but elites from all walks of life who were willing to share their ideas. For example, Davis was a PhD student from MIT, and he was also the developer of an application called Capture. The novel idea he brought was the audio tool he and his partners developed and designed called Capture. Unlike what people understood, it was a real visual microphone. Through algorithms, it captured the resonance of objects that resonated with sound in a completely silent video, and then converted it into a comprehensible audio track. Another example was Daniel. He developed an experimental perception toolbox that could be used by both blind and sighted people through teaching echolocation. This might have something to do with his blindness since the age of 1. He was able to identify his direction by tapping his tongue and then through the echo. Therefore, they believed that the image produced by echolocation was similar to what was seen visually. Perhaps the blind could really see the world through the echo. There were also novel inventions such as 3D printing and thought-provoking discoveries. However, Poplar Fruit went to listen to a woman's lecture out of curiosity. Her name was Monica Lewinsky. That's right, it was the White House trainee who caused trouble with Clinton. Monica Lewinsky's speech was very good. Her choice of words was more subtle, but the content of her speech was not at all subtle. From time to time, she would throw out some nonsense, which made the audience laugh out loud. For example, she said that she made her first public speech a few months ago, and then a 27-year-old boy hit on her. After all, Monica Lewinsky was 41 years old. Of course, this frivolous topic was not the laughing point. The main reason was that Monica Lewinsky said that the main reason she rejected the other party was because the other party failed to hit on her. He said that he could let her experience being 22 years old again. When Lewinsky was 22 years old, she was faced with the biggest crisis in her life. You can find out on Baidu. Poplar Fruit did not agree with some of Monica Lewinsky's views. He did not even approve of her roundabout way of clearing her own name. However, Poplar Fruit still recognized Monica Lewinsky's bravery. After all, in China, it was impossible for a person who caused such a huge scandal in the political arena to make a comeback. But Monica Lewinsky was actually right about one thing. Everyone would make mistakes in their 20s, but one could persevere and rewrite a different ending for one's story. Chapter 1142. Finally, it was time for Poplar Fruit to step onto the TED stage. Of course, before he came up, the host had already given him a brief but detailed introduction, so when Poplar Fruit came up, there was already thunderous applause. "Thank you," Poplar Fruit said with a smile as he held a small remote control. Without any small talk, every minute and every second on the TED stage was extra precious. Poplar Fruit immediately began his speech. When you ask the president of any country, what is the most precious resource in your country, they will not answer immediately. They would not immediately answer that it was a child. But when you say children, they will almost immediately agree with you. Poplar Fruit's topic was very subtle. He stated a fact that almost everyone agreed with. In China, we have two different kinds of children. One is the children in the city, and the other is the children in the mountain villages. Poplar Fruit used two pictures of different children. The one in the city was a color picture, and the other was black and white. The contrast was very strong. The education they receive is very different. The children in the city have the best teachers and training classes in China, but in the mountain villages, they are more often than not looking forward to having a teacher. Just one is enough, and they never dare to ask for too much. Poplar Fruit's pictures and simple words at the end of his PowerPoint presentation made it very clear. The Chinese government has been working hard to support the development of the poor areas in the Midwest, but the results are not good. These children in the mountains lack education. Even if there is, the quality of education is very different. It's not that the government is unwilling to support them, but that no teachers are willing to go to the mountains. Poplar Fruit spoke very seriously, but he threw away a little burden and asked with a smile, because we all like the city, like the big city. It's just like how young people don't want to stay on the farm and look forward to the tall buildings, fashionable beauties, or handsome guys in the city, right? Poplar Fruit's rhetorical question made many listeners laugh kindly. Everyone present was knowledgeable or had high social status. They could understand what Poplar Fruit meant by young people's choice. The future of a country lies in its children, and the best way to change the poverty of a region is not to support it with cash. Similarly, if they want to have a future where they are no longer poor, the breakthrough lies in their children. Poplar Fruit said solemnly. Education is very important, especially the primary education of children. Because you have knowledge, you have the possibility and motivation to change the future. I tried to think about how to bring education to the children in the mountains when no teachers are willing to stay in the mountains. At this time, I don't want to think better, because we have to have it before we can think better, right? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Then, I had an idea. Why don't I give each of them a computer? This way, through the internet, a window to the world, they can see the world outside the mountains and learn all the knowledge they want to learn. Poplar Fruit's thoughts began to slowly unfold here. The audience was silent. Everyone held their breath and listened to Poplar Fruit's words. Why a computer? Someone questioned. You know, a computer is a luxury for these children who can't even fill their stomachs. Even the price of a computer is enough for their family to live for a year, or let them study in a school outside the mountains for half a year. Poplar Fruit switched to the PowerPoint, and a cobweb-shaped picture appeared on the big screen behind him. He continued, in fact, as I said just now, the most important thing is not the computer itself, but the meaning of the computer. That is education, a better education. Let me give a simple example. The price of a computer can buy 100 books, but through the computer and the internet, our children can access 10 million books. Heavens, which school's library has 10 million books? You mean Harvard University Library, which has 15 million books? Well, it doesn't matter. Forget what I said. Poplar Fruit's little humor caused the audience to laugh. But education is not only about books, especially children's education and primary school education. Children need the guidance of teachers to learn the knowledge they need to enter a better school outside the mountains and enter society. Poplar Fruit laughed. If they are only given a computer, they may only use it to play games. So I thought, why don't we let teachers who are unwilling to go to the mountains teach children through the internet and video? Poplar Fruit jumped quickly and showed a picture of the modern remote education in the Xiong Family Village School on the big screen behind him. There was a clue like a network cable, which led to a picture of a teacher teaching in the city. In fact, there was no need for Poplar Fruit to explain. The principle was very simple, and everyone could understand at a glance. But not many people had thought of it before. It was also because of this shock that the audience sincerely applauded Poplar Fruit. But Poplar Fruit's speech was far from the end. Yes, my idea has received the support of many university volunteers. They are all willing to contribute to the education of these children, and I have already broken the constraints of space and distance. They are really great, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. There was another round of applause. In fact, foreigners also paid a lot of attention to the spirit of voluntary service. After the applause stopped, Poplar Fruit continued. Well, now that we have finished talking about have, let's start looking for better. Poplar Fruit changed to a PowerPoint, which was a picture of the rich education content of the children in the city. In terms of education, in fact, it is still very difficult for them to compete with the children in the city, because the children in the city have piano education, calligraphy and painting education, sports education, and so on since childhood. Some people would say that since they already have education, aren't they satisfied? Poplar Fruit asked and answered his own question. Yes, maybe the children are satisfied, but I am not satisfied. I want these children to also have a very good quality education, not just the knowledge required in the textbook. Because all men are equal. All men recreate equal. Poplar Fruit's last sentence was not shouted without basis. It was the most classic sentence from the United States Declaration of Independence. Suddenly, this sentence seemed to have poked the itch of the audience. Although it was held in Canada, most of the audience were Americans. Yes. As if Poplar Fruit had raised his arm and shouted, the audience was excited and loudly agreed with Poplar Fruit's statement. They even applauded desperately. Chapter 1143. In Vancouver's famous Phil Golden Hall, where the TED conference was held, nearly 1,000 audience members sat quietly in their seats. They stared intently at the elegant speaker on the stage, as if the excitement just now had never happened. The TED conference had never been about appearances or countries. A speaker's appearance, country, and fluency did not have much of an impact on the popularity of the speech. That was because people only cared about whether the ideas expressed in the speech were interesting or not. But it was undeniable that a handsome face could be pleasing to the eyes, and fluent oral fluency could make people feel comfortable listening to it. Poplar Fruit had indeed achieved these 2 points. To a certain extent, this added a lot of luster to his speech. However, the reason why everyone listened to Poplar Fruit's speech with such rapt attention was because the content of Poplar Fruit's speech was wonderful. The model of remote teaching seemed to have opened a door in front of them, a door that could change the world and shock their hearts. If you want to make distance education better, you have to make it better. This important key lies in our little computer. Poplar Fruit was in high spirits as he changed the PowerPoint presentation. For remote education, we have developed an online learning system. Through this system, students can do homework. The system will give them questions, give them marks, guide them to check and fill in the gaps. It can also collect questions that they don't know how to do or don't do well enough. After a period of time, the children can find them again in the questions of their own homework. The teacher can also understand the knowledge points that the students did not learn well enough through the data feedback from the system. Of course, homework is only a small function of this system, Poplar Fruit said confidently. We don't arrange a lot of homework for the students in class. Poplar Fruit said, the biggest significance of this system is that it can help students to discover and learn on their own. We are very grateful for the help of the large number of outstanding college student volunteers. We have recorded and updated more than 300 kinds of interest courses in the system. This covers sports, art, philosophy, literature, and even computer programming. As long as the children are willing, they can find their favorite interest courses through our system to self-study. It's not just the video mode. You can see that our engineers have designed many rich and interesting self-learning modes for this system. Poplar Fruit directly played a 20-second video. After the video ended, people couldn't help but applaud Poplar Fruit. Thank you, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. However, Poplar Fruit wanted to continue. This time, he used more direct figures and graphs to explain. I'm very honored that the long-distance education model I initiated has received the support of the Chinese government. It's also because of this promotion that as of March, 47 million children in poor mountainous areas have received long-distance education. This number has already reached 80% of the poor children in China, and we believe that this number will continue to increase in the future. Poplar Fruit's statement received some applause, but not much. After all, this was an internal issue of China. Even if it was shocking, everyone still felt that it was somewhat irrelevant. Poplar Fruit had already expected this. His speech finally came to the last part. The first part was have, the second part was better, and the last part was Poplar Fruit's entire speech had to be sublimated. This was also the time for the foreshadowing to come into play. In October 2014, I gave a speech at Capital University, hoping to inspire more young people to invest in public welfare. Poplar Fruit changed a picture. In the picture, the background was a centennial hall, while the main characters were Poplar Fruit and a dark-skinned young man. His name is Mukaru, an international student from Tanzania. After his speech, he came to me and asked if I could bring this model of distance education to the African continent, so that the out-of-school children in his other homeland, the Congo, could also receive an education, a better education. The audience's interest was once again piqued by poplar fruit. They held their breaths, and the entire hall was silent. Not even the sound of typing on the keyboard could be heard. My first reaction at that time was, how is that possible? Poplar Fruit spread his hands and made a surprised expression. It's not that I don't want to, but everyone knows that that's Africa, that's the Congo, the poorest and most chaotic country in the world. The PowerPoint showed a screenshot of an American media report. A group of anti-government soldiers wielding AK rifles were dragging behind a dirty pickup truck. They want distance education, but do they have computers and internet? Poplar Fruit continued to throw out questions. Even if we can support them, can these children protect these computers and not let the bad guys take them away? Poplar Fruit's questions were like a hammer hitting the hearts of everyone in the audience. Later, we redesigned distance education according to the actual situation in Tanzania and the Congo. We've built a simple, portable camp not far from the village. Not only are there remote education rooms equipped with computers, but there are also other NGOs and charity organizations, such as the Red Cross and other medical aid teams, such as the United Nations World Food Programme aid teams. We'll ask the local government army and the United Nations peacekeeping force to help protect the camp. This way, our camp can be considered a more comprehensive aid community. Poplar Fruit showed a few pictures taken by Mukaru. Food aid is to help the local people who can't even eat to solve their survival problems. Medical aid is to help them get rid of the threat of illness and death. Education aid is equally important. Poplar Fruit looked around and said solemnly, we can't change their poverty, but we can help them gain the ability to change themselves. There's an ancient Chinese medicine saying that if you treat the symptoms but not the root cause, then it's meaningless because the illness will relapse. Poplar Fruit translated the complicated ancient language into sentences that even foreigners could understand. To change the current situation of poverty in Africa, we can't blindly provide them with aid. This is only treating the symptoms. We need to spread civilization so that they will no longer be ignorant. We need to give them the ability to change their lives and the lives of the people around them. Only then can we stop the transmission of their poverty from the root. This is also the meaning of our distance education. Poplar Fruit bowed deeply. At this point, his speech came to an end. And this full stop was also perfect. Because nearly 1,000 people in the audience stood up and clapped for Poplar Fruit. The applause was thunderous and lasted for a long time like a storm. Chapter 1144. The applause lasted for a long time, and no one counted. Poplar Fruit repeatedly bowed. Finally, the founder of TED, Mr. Anderson, pulled Poplar Fruit back to the stage and pretended to have a chat with Poplar Fruit. Only then did the applause gradually stop. Leon, thank you for sharing. Mr. Anderson smiled and patted Poplar Fruit on the shoulder. It was not uncommon for Mr. Anderson to chat with the speakers after a speech. In the past 2 days, as long as the speaker was recognized by everyone and had a more innovative or breakthrough idea, he would personally come to the stage. This was also a form of gratitude to the speaker. The old man was tall and thin, and his hair was a little gray, but his blue eyes were bright. He himself was also a person who liked to give speeches. With his expertise, TED had become the world's most profound and extensive public speaking event. Many world-famous people were willing to come here to share their ideas. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Foreigners did not need too much etiquette. Poplar Fruit just smiled and said calmly, I am very grateful for your invitation. You know, this is really a surprise. No, you are a full surprise to us. Look at the magical ideas you have brought. I think all of our listeners have the highest respect for your sharing, because you have brought hope to that poor land, Mr. Anderson said with his hands open. As soon as his voice fell, many people began to applaud. Thank you. As Ted said, ideas are worth spreading. With my ability alone, or a few people's ability, it is impossible to change the current situation of poverty in Africa, and it is impossible to spread the light of education to every poor corner. Poplar Fruit paused, then looked at the nearly 1,000 audience members and said loudly, "But at TED, if I spread this model of distance education, this idea of public welfare, with TED's hundreds of millions of viewers, there will be more people, more funds, and more NGOs joining." "You mean that everyone can use your model of distance education to help the children in Africa?" Mr. Anderson asked. "Of course, not only the children in Africa, but all human children in the world should receive education, whether it is traditional education or distance education. The idea of public welfare should be open and shared. I'm very willing to communicate with organizations that are willing to invest in public education. I'm also very willing to see the value of distance education in other public welfare organizations or countries." "Excellent. Really." Mr. Anderson patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said, "Leon, it's no exaggeration to say that your speech has left me with the deepest impression and the strongest shock I've ever heard." Mr. Anderson's high praise was the first time in the history of the TED conference, but no one would refute Mr. Anderson's praise because they felt the same way. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us once again thank Leon Young with a warm round of applause." Mr. Anderson was the first to applaud, and then the applause continued until Poplar Fruit walked off the stage under Mr. Anderson's guidance. Poplar Fruit was actually very excited at the moment. He had prepared a lot for this speech, but he did not expect it to be so successful. Looking at the eyes of the audience who were applauding, Poplar Fruit's heart was filled with strength. What Poplar Fruit did not know was that before he returned to China, the video of the speech had already been uploaded to major domestic and foreign video websites. In just one day, the number of views had exceeded 100 million, and on the second and third days, under the coverage of major media outlets, the number of views of the video had increased exponentially. One had to know that this was a speech video that people who liked it would like, and people who did not like it would not even watch. To be able to get such a high number of views, it did not make sense to use Poplar Fruit's influence to explain it. It could only be said that Poplar Fruit's speech was really shocking, and his ideas did indeed receive the support of a lot of audience members. Not to mention the attention that Poplar Fruit's speech received on the internet. On the afternoon of the third day, at the time of the closing of the TED conference, Poplar Fruit and two other speakers received the grand prize of today's TED conference from Mr. Anderson at the closing ceremony. Poplar Fruit's award had actually been decided as early as yesterday when Mr. Anderson gave such a high evaluation. However, at today's award ceremony, several things were announced that surprised Poplar Fruit and made him feel emotional. One had to know that the three winners of the TED conference every year, in addition to the prize money, would receive the support of TED. The TED organizers would help the winners realize their ideas. The more famous one was the former richest man in the world, Mr. Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, who often visited the TED conference. He often sponsored speakers at the TED conference to realize their ideas. After Poplar Fruit received the award, Mr. Anderson solemnly announced that several rich people, including Mr. Bill Gates, would jointly invest $500 million to establish a global charity fund for distance education. $500 million. This was a huge amount of money that was more than 3 billion yuan. Not to mention that Poplar Fruit's own charity fund did not have that much money. Even the current domestic government's investment in distance education was not more than 3 billion yuan. This was only the investment of a few rich people. With publicity and the influence of these rich people, it was believed that there would be more donations. Poplar Fruit was invited to be the chief consultant and spokesperson of the foundation, to cooperate with NGOs around the world who volunteered to devote themselves to charity education. Starting from Africa, they were committed to education assistance for poor children around the world. Of course, Poplar Fruit would not refuse this invitation. The chief consultant was mainly because Poplar Fruit proposed this idea, and Poplar Fruit did have the ability to communicate with people all over the world. The spokesperson was a bit interesting. Poplar Fruit was actually not a celebrity, but it was undeniable that Poplar Fruit had a good influence all over the world. Starting from supermodel, Poplar Fruit appeared in the eyes of foreign media every year, and this influence was positive. As a result, the burden on Poplar Fruit's shoulders would be much heavier. But responsibility and opportunity came together. From the beginning of the study of distance education, didn't Poplar Fruit already have a dream in his heart to change the world? When Poplar Fruit flew home across the Pacific Ocean, the domestic and foreign media rushed to report the establishment of this charity fund. Poplar Fruit also occupied a lot of the pages. Compared with the caution, or modesty, of the domestic media, foreign media had already praised Poplar Fruit to the sky. At the beginning, it was just a title of praise for Poplar Fruit in the academic world, but now it was also used by foreign media. The father of future education, the father of distance education, or the father of African enlightenment, these praises were obviously a bit exaggerated. Even Poplar Fruit himself couldn't help but blush when he heard about it later. Chapter 1145. Poplar Fruit returned to Guangzhou with great momentum. The entire country's media was reporting on Poplar Fruit's speech and success. Not only that, many of the country's official mouthpieces praised Poplar Fruit's philanthropic spirit. Poplar Fruit felt that they were overpraising him. He wasn't a philanthropic person. He only did what he thought was right. It was just that because of the huge innovation of this good deed, many people thought that it was amazing. Poplar Fruit even felt that the reason why distance education could help so many people was because his hard work was just a little bit more than the university volunteers. At the same time, it couldn't be separated from the strong support of the country. Poplar Fruit was also well aware that the Global Distance Education Charity Fund was definitely a backstage game between the Western countries and the Chinese government. Can't you see that Yang Guo is just a small consultant and spokesperson? At most, he was a mascot pushed to the front by both sides. Perhaps Poplar Fruit had zero control over the foundation. Poplar Fruit wouldn't tell anyone about this. Poplar Fruit wouldn't just be a mascot. Since he was the consultant, Poplar Fruit would make his due contribution. Perhaps, when summer vacation came, it would be good to take Kiki and Fong Beibei to Africa to see lions and elephants. After Poplar Fruit returned to Guangzhou, he accepted a few interviews that he couldn't reject. Then, he quieted down and went to school, Kiki's kindergarten, and home every day. However, Poplar Fruit still didn't know that because of the explosive news overseas, it attracted the attention of the domestic media. Coincidentally, it was all seen by one person, Mango TV. Recently, the program team of Where Are We Going, Dad, had been opposing producer Xie. The main problem was the selection of guests for the third season. Most of the stars and cute children in the first and second seasons earned a lot of attention and money. Not to mention the adorable children, the fathers even borrowed their children's popularity. The most typical example was Qian Liang, who jumped from an outdated Olympic star to a popular person in the entertainment industry. His value soared, and the advertising fees for the advertisements that he and his daughter co-starred in were calculated in the basic unit of millions. When they were preparing for the second season, some of the guests were people from the station or people from outside the station who had connections. They had no choice but to accept it. As expected, producer Xie and the entire program team suffered. Not to mention the failure of the program's ratings, it wasn't as good as The Running Man on other TV stations. A guest used the program to hype up a movie, causing the program team to be chased by reporters. In the third season, the promoted producer Xie decided that all the guests had to be chosen from the perspective of the program. Even if they had connections, they had to see if they were suitable for the program. In the end, producer Xie still couldn't completely fall out with these connections. However, he didn't expect that there were still many people who objected to his proposed guest list. Especially the only female guest list, Little Red, was objected to by everyone. These voices came from within the program team. Producer Xie knew that there must be some agency's money and connections causing trouble, but he couldn't do anything about it. For the female guests, producer Xie intended to choose the Taiwanese program host, the Canadian Shia Kelly, and his Chinese-Canadian daughter, Poppy. As for the reason, producer Xie wrote it very clearly. He wanted to bring some elements to the third season that were different from the past. In other words, the so-called foreigners. Producer Xie felt that with the addition of foreigners, there might be some innovation in the conflict of the show's characters, not the kind of conflict where they quarreled. Furthermore, Shia Kelly himself knew quite a lot about Chinese culture. As a foreigner standing in front of the television, it would be easy for him to give off a refreshing feeling. On the other hand, producer Xie also considered international influence. In the past, the first and second seasons of Where Are You Going, Daddy? Had Taiwanese guests, so it was more popular there. However, this time, Xie Kelly could still spread his influence to the other side of the ocean and into the eyes of the Caucasians in the United States and Canada. This was definitely a great success for the program team. This could also be seen from the fact that he chose Liu Yi as a guest. Liu Yi was a native Chinese, but his wife was French. Their family had even filmed French programs before, so they were quite famous in France. However, this reason was also used by the other people in the program team to question him. Who said that the show's influence can spread overseas just by choosing a foreigner? Many people scoffed at this. Xie Kelly had always been active in Taiwanese. In the past, he was only a behind-the-scenes reporter in Canada. He had some influence in Taiwanese, but to spread it to the United States and Canada was really a pipe dream. There were also many programs in the country that invited foreigners as guests, but they didn't see foreigners paying attention to it. Don't forget that the entertainment programs in the United States were hundreds of times more colorful than those in China. Even in South Korea, the original variety program team of this program dared not say that they could spread their influence to the United States. At the end of the day, Where Are You Going, Daddy? Was a program for the common people. It was highly praised by the masses because the program was very down-to-earth. If a foreigner with blonde hair and blue eyes were suddenly introduced into the program, even if the young people could accept it, what if the older uncles and aunties could not accept it? Don't lose the watermelon and pick up the sesame seed. This sentence was a tactful way for a leader to express his dissatisfaction with producer Xie. Producer Xie sneered in his heart. How could he not know that the note that the assistant director of his program team passed to him a while ago was written by this leader? He didn't know who paid him, but he insisted on bringing in a famous actor who had recently appeared in variety shows. To be honest, producer Xie was not very against this actor who worked hard to become a big star step by step. If the conditions were right, producer Xie did not mind giving him face. However, the other party also wanted to bring his daughter. Not to mention that she was young, she did not fit the role of the most important female guest in the third season of the program. Producer Xie wanted to take on all the pressure himself, and once in a while, he would decide on Xie Kelly and his daughter. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit once again appeared in their sights. He had international influence. After the TED Talk, Poplar Fruit's foreign media attention was no less than that of the leaders of China. He was definitely more influential than Xie Kelly, needless to say. Not to mention his domestic influence. Poplar Fruit was one of the top 10 people who touched China this year. His name was probably included in the political science exam questions. He had the identity of a Chinese citizen. A handsome young man born and raised in the countryside would definitely be popular with middle-aged and elderly women. Poplar Fruit's dominance among the young people was also unquestionable. The tens of millions of fans on Weibo were not just for show. Kiki. This girl had always been producer Xie's choice. She had great popularity in the country. Moreover, from her and her father's appearance on some occasions and Weibo videos, she completely fit the role of the third season of the program. The most important thing was her looks. Friends, with Poplar Fruit's handsomeness and Kiki's beauty, they could definitely become the third season's attractiveness factor. Yes, Poplar Fruit was quite good. If it was Poplar Fruit, other people's previous doubts could be eliminated in one fell swoop. Moreover, it would not cause the roles of two mixed-race children to overlap at the same time. This was also something that producer Xie was somewhat conflicted about previously. Moreover, if it was Poplar Fruit, producer Xie could also pull in a strong ally, Teacher He. If he and Teacher He both spoke out in support of Poplar Fruit being a guest, who else would object? Yes, it was Poplar Fruit. Producer Xie finally made a decision in his heart. Chapter 1146. Although producer Xie had already decided on Poplar Fruit and Kiki as the guests for the third season of Where Do You Go, Dad?, the list hadn't been finalized yet. There were still one or two Xing dads that needed further consideration. Therefore, before everything was settled, Poplar Fruit hadn't received any notice. Now, there was still a problem in front of Poplar Fruit. He had promised Zheng Mingsheng that he would lay his cards on the table with Zhang Yujie. Even if he was in a dilemma, he couldn't avoid it anymore, right? Zhang Yujie had already returned from abroad, and he had also returned from abroad. There was no reason why he couldn't find an opportunity to communicate with Zhang Yujie. Moreover, the publishing house had gathered all the executives for a meeting today to discuss the transformation of the new translation route to a traditional and e-commerce publishing house. Yang Gu didn't pay attention to what everyone was discussing in the meeting room. He didn't even dare to raise his head to look at Zhang Yujie. Although he pretended to be listening, he was just hiding the fact that he had a lot on his mind. After the meeting, the other executives had already returned to their departments. Poplar Fruit followed Zhang Yujie to her office. The assistant brought a cup of steaming hot coffee for each of them, but Zhang Yujie immediately waved her hand to dismiss her. Poplar Fruit gently fiddled with a photo frame on Zhang Yujie's desk. The photo was of Zhang Yujie and her younger brother Zhang Taiming. It should have been taken when Zhang Taiming graduated. Zhang Taiming was still wearing his academic gown. Of course, Poplar Fruit's attention wasn't on the photo frame. He just didn't know how to open his mouth. There's a button below. Zhang Yujie's voice softly came from behind Poplar Fruit. Every time she was alone with Poplar Fruit, Zhang Yujie's strong female attitude disappeared without a trace. When Poplar Fruit heard this, he gently pressed the button. Suddenly, the photo frame rolled on its own and another photo appeared. It was a picture of mountains and rivers. There were lush cliffs and sparkling seas. Therefore, it could be considered a picture of mountains and rivers. However, the main characters of the photo were obviously the couple in the photo. The man was carrying the woman, and the woman was smiling like a flower. She was in high spirits. It was a memory from a long time ago, although it had only been 3 years. Poplar Fruit turned around and saw the tired Zhang Yujie. Her eyes were filled with sadness. He forced a smile and said, "I almost forgot that you took a picture of me back then." However, Zhang Yujie did not intend to continue Poplar Fruit's conversation. She softly said, directly revealing the topic that Poplar Fruit was still hesitating about. "My dad asked you to come, right?" Poplar Fruit was surprised and asked, "You already know?" Zhang Yujie smiled lazily and said with disdain, "Of course I know. He even asked me in a roundabout way if I had seen you recently. Furthermore, during the Spring Festival, he quarreled with his family in Beijing. What else can I not guess?" Poplar Fruit was silent. In the end, he asked, "Then what do you think? Is it important what I think?" Zhang Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit with sadness in her eyes and asked. It was not whether it was important or not, but what was the use of Zhang Yujie thinking? If it was useful, it would not have dragged on with Poplar Fruit until now without any result. The silly Poplar Fruit nodded and said solemnly, "It is important." Zhang Yujie smiled sweetly and hooked her finger at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and lowered his head. However, he turned his face slightly. Zhang Yujie only moved closer to Poplar Fruit's ear and said softly, "What I think is not important. What is important is what you think." Poplar Fruit was not used to the fragrance in the air. He raised his head and looked at Zhang Yujie. "I just want to know what kind of decision you made." Zhang Yujie's tone was still a little frivolous. However, Poplar Fruit saw a heart-piercing pain in her eyes. Although the two of them were like guessing riddles, everyone knew what they were talking about. "I don't know," Poplar Fruit blurted out. This answer was completely different from what Poplar Fruit had promised Zheng Mingsheng and the decision he made before coming here. However, Yang Gu didn't know why she would give such an answer out of the blue. Perhaps it was because of the photo that awakened his memories. Perhaps it was because of the pain in Zhang Yujie's eyes. Or perhaps he did not have an answer in his heart. Zhang Yujie suddenly smiled. Her smile was very bright. Her smile was brighter than ever. It was as if the spring breeze had dyed the peach blossoms red and blown away the tiredness and sadness. "I know you have me in your heart." Zhang Yujie put her hands behind her back and turned in a circle on her shiny black high heels. She smiled and said in high spirits, "Ah, it's not what you think." Poplar Fruit quickly waved his hand and explained. That's right, that's right. Zhang Yujie's shamelessness made Poplar Fruit smile helplessly. It seemed that this showdown was destined to not have any good results. Poplar Fruit could only stop Zhang Yujie and said, Yujie, that's enough. Stop messing around and listen to my explanation. In the end, Poplar Fruit was frightened by Zhang Yujie suddenly standing on her tiptoes and leaning forward on his shoulder. He could not help but lean back and almost lay down on Zhang Yujie's desk. However, the photo frame behind him was already on the desk. Zhang Yujie gently pressed her hands on Poplar Fruit's chest and slightly supported herself. She looked at Poplar Fruit with a very oppressive gaze. Her red lips moved slightly and said, I don't want to hear your explanation. I want to hear the voice in your heart and your body's reaction. It was also because of Poplar Fruit's amazing physical fitness that he was able to lean back nearly 90 degrees without being pressed down on the desk by Zhang Yujie. However, Zhang Yujie's every word, including the soft touch on his chest, was a great challenge to Poplar Fruit's body and mind. Leaning on Poplar Fruit's body, Zhang Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit's handsome face and his deep eyes. She could not control herself and took the lead to move closer to Poplar Fruit's lips. Was she going to be pushed back? If that was the case, Poplar Fruit would not be Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit blocked his mouth with one hand and then used his waist to support Zhang Yujie with the other hand. Yujie. Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry as he used a tissue to wipe the lipstick mark on his palm. However, looking at Zhang Yujie's stubborn eyes, he could not scold or hit her. He could only resentfully say, You're being naughty again. It was as if he was scolding Kiki. However, this trick was quite effective on Zhang Yujie. She no longer moved and obediently stood to the side. Poplar Fruit sighed softly and said, I won't persuade you. Persuading you would be cruel to you. I really can't do it. Zhang Yujie nodded obediently and really turned into an obedient child. Poplar Fruit could not help but be long-winded. But we don't have a future, do you know that? It's okay, I don't care. Zhang Yujie's pitiful look made Poplar Fruit really unable to scold her. Anyway, what I mean is that you shouldn't keep waiting. Maybe one day you'll meet your happiness. You have to seize it. After Poplar Fruit finished speaking, he wiped his hands and ran away. Zhang Yujie's electrifying eyes could not be looked at too much. If he looked again, Poplar Fruit was really afraid that he would not be able to control himself. After Poplar Fruit ran away, Zhang Yujie sat on the chair and laughed foolishly for a long time. When she came back to her senses, the coffee on the table that her assistant had poured for her had already turned cold. After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Yujie did not ask her assistant to change it. Instead, she brought the 2 cups of coffee that she had not drunk to herself. She folded her hands on the table and leaned her head down. She was lost in thought as she looked at the 2 cups of coffee, the photo frame that Poplar Fruit had held up before he left, and the picturesque photo in the photo frame. The coffee would turn cold as she waited. However, as long as she cherished it and did not change it, it would still be that cup of fragrant coffee. Yes, Zhang Yujie believed that it would still be the taste that she liked. Chapter 1147. Recently, Poplar Fruit had become busy again. However, it was not because of work, but because of happiness. There were not many troublesome matters at work. Even for the Global Distance Education Charity Fund, Poplar Fruit had only held several video conferences with the other party. It was still in the preparation period, so Poplar Fruit did not need to worry too much. Poplar Fruit, on the other hand, wrote a book. It was not a literary book, but a slightly boring theoretical book. He spent nearly 300,000 words to introduce his experience and ideas on distance education in detail. Poplar Fruit published some bold ideas that had yet to be implemented in the book one by one. The book would be published, but it would not be based on sales. It would be provided to the Global Distance Education Charity Fund as well as NGOs around the world who were interested in it. However, compared to the Global Distance Education Charity Fund, China's layout in this regard was much faster. Poplar Fruit also cooperated with the Chinese government, putting in more effort than the former. He could already see that the Chinese government had hired a large number of university graduates to teach Africa's Mogansha. More than 30 distance education camps had been opened, spread across 8 countries in Africa that had friendly relations with China. There was no need to mention these things. So, what was Poplar Fruit's happiness? Half of Kiki's second semester in kindergarten had passed in the blink of an eye. In the middle of the semester, Kiki's kindergarten would hold a small party. However, it was not a group of children in Chinese kindergartens who would perform a dance with their faces blushing, but a drama performance that was often played in Western countries. It might be more appropriate to describe it as a drama night instead of a party. Not only that, the kindergarten would also display the children's calligraphy and painting works, traditional Chinese culture lessons, and handmade works. These were not classified as good-looking or ugly. After all, they were all children who had not gone to school yet. No one would ask too much of them. Unless they were too busy with business and could not make it, the parents would all attend to appreciate the children's works and performances. Although the performance in Kiki's class was a very simple fairy tale drama, and the kindergarten had prepared the props, Poplar Fruit still needed to accompany Kiki, who had to play an important role, Snow White, to practice her lines. Fong Beibei also went to find a tailor to make a beautiful princess dress for Kiki. Kiki received such an important role in her first fairy tale drama, which made the little girl so excited that she could not sleep for several days. Kiki was especially serious. For her first acting, Kiki prepared almost every day. She even abandoned herself at night to watch cartoons for an hour every day, pulling her father and mother, repeatedly practicing. Yang Guo actually had some complaints about Chichi's role. It wasn't that he was worried that Chichi wouldn't be able to handle the pressure of being the main character. It was just that he couldn't accept the fact that there was a kissing scene in this role. There was actually a little bastard who hugged and kissed my daughter. Poplar Fruit was depressed for a few days, and he could not eat happily. Fong Beibei also laughed at Poplar Fruit, saying that he was jealous of his daughter. Children, how can they know what kissing means? Moreover, this kissing scene is not a kiss on the mouth, but a gentle kiss on the forehead. Fong Beibei smiled and comforted Poplar Fruit. If they don't kiss Snow White, will this fairy tale drama still be Snow White? Well, if that was the case, Yang Guo could still barely accept it. During the rehearsal, Kiki's performance was very good, including the scene with her father after coming back. However, Poplar Fruit was still very worried, because he knew that everything could only be seen when they actually went on stage. Who knew if the children could bear the pressure of the audience? Fong Beibei understood Poplar Fruit's feelings, but in order to not let Poplar Fruit, who was overly concerned, be long-winded and affect Kiki, Fong Beibei directly deprived Poplar Fruit of the right to send Kiki to kindergarten that morning. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei only went to the kindergarten to participate in the activity in the evening. Before going, Poplar Fruit, this guy, was still thinking about what to wear. Should he wear the most handsome suit? Okay. Did you forget that you watched American dramas? The foreigners dress more casually. Originally, this activity was for parents and children to have fun together. Don't be so nervous and scare the children, Fong Beibei rebuked. Poplar Fruit said stubbornly, how could that be? Didn't you see that Mitchell and Cameron both attach great importance to their daughter's school program? Modern Family. Fong Beibei looked at him and didn't say anything. Poplar Fruit lowered his head, pursed his lips, and said, okay, I know. When they arrived at the kindergarten, Poplar Fruit saw the super beautifully dressed Kiki version of Snow White. She wore a fluffy princess dress and an exquisite princess crown. Especially the little girl who didn't need any makeup, she was just like what was described in the original novel. This girl's skin is as white as snow, her cheeks are as red as apples, and her hair is black and soft. She was so beautiful that if anyone saw her, they would really like her. Because there was still the final preparation, Kiki reluctantly said goodbye to her parents and followed her teacher and friends backstage. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei took advantage of the fact that the program hadn't started yet to admire the children's works that were displayed in the kindergarten's hall. Poplar Fruit even started to show off his daughter crazily. He asked Fong Beibei to take a few photos of him and Kiki's works and then uploaded them to Weibo to share with the fans. However, whether it was Poplar Fruit or the fans who were looking forward to it, What they wanted to see the most tonight was Kiki's performance. There were already many fans who left comments on Poplar Fruit's new Weibo, asking Poplar Fruit to quickly post Kiki's photos. The drama night finally began. The senior students' fairy tale plays came out first, and Kiki's performance was in the middle. Obviously, they couldn't expect too much from these children who hadn't yet reached school age. Even the senior children had stage fright halfway through the performance and were carried away by the teacher while crying. Fortunately, his role wasn't important, and the scene was chaotic for a while, so he could still continue acting. No matter what kind of role the parents played in the business world during the day, tonight, they were all soft-hearted people in front of the children. They would cheer for the children's unnatural performances and cheer for them when they made mistakes. Anyway, the atmosphere was happy and harmonious, just right. Finally, it was Kiki's performance time. When the little guys appeared, Poplar Fruit applauded excitedly. He just didn't introduce to the people next to him, "The most beautiful Snow White is my daughter." Yes, my daughter. Poplar Fruit was still a little shy. Fong Beibei took on the responsibility of taking photos and videos, because Poplar Fruit was always excited when he saw Kiki's performance. When he was excited, he would dance with joy. That wouldn't do. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.